Chapter 177. In the Manhattan base, all the hunters and psychokinesis were looking at Mo Sher in horror. They all had the same ridiculous thought in their minds. This Eastern psychokinesis might have broken through the limit of psychokinesis and reached the next level. No one knew what was stronger than psychokinesis. After all, up until now, none of the psychokinesis in the base had reached level 8. Not to mention breaking through the limit and reaching the next level. However, the power that Mo Sher just showed made everyone understand that it was the next level of psychokinesis. Even the two level 7 telekinesis masters in the Manhattan base were unable to put up any resistance under the suppression of this Asian man's telekinesis. They were immediately crushed to the ground. As for the two strongest level 8 hunters in the base, even with their strong bodies, they couldn't even last a second under this Eastern man's psychokinesis. They were directly pressed to the ground. This kind of power was impossible for a level 10 psychokinesis to achieve. At this moment, Mo Sher finally spoke slowly. "I'm just passing by and came in to ask a question." With the foreign language proficiency skill, he could speak any language on Earth at will. As soon as he said this, everyone else was stunned. Passing by? There were zombies everywhere outside, and there were even vampires that were stronger than zombies. How strong was he to be able to pass by in such an environment? The bald black hunter in the lead took a step forward and said, "That's right. Before we do a virus test, we must isolate you." Mo Sher turned his head and slowly looked at the bald hunter. The bald hunter felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar when Mo Sher glanced at him. This Eastern man's eyes were like an abyss. Just by looking at each other, they felt as if they could fall into the abyss and be swallowed by it. That kind of creepy feeling made all the hair on his body stand up. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva as his Adam's apple moved. He changed his words. "Okay. You can ask the general what you want to ask. I'll take you there now." The other hunters and psychics looked at the bald black man in confusion when they heard this. Every one of them had a black face full of question marks. The bald black man ignored them. He lowered his head and quickly led Mo Sher away. When the others saw this, they began to discuss in low voices. "My God! Why did the regiment commander change so much? Commander has always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. He would rather die than submit to coercion. What's wrong with you today? Why did you change your mind on the spot? That's so unlike him. Did the commander take the wrong medicine? No matter how strong that Easterner is, with Captain's character, he shouldn't have admitted defeat on the spot. How could they know what their commander had just faced?" In today's post-apocalyptic world, life and death were nothing to be taken lightly, and there were many people who would fight if they were not convinced. However, not many people had experienced the despair of looking into the abyss, as if they were about to be swallowed up in the next moment, and the fear that came from the depths of their bones. As for their commander, he was fortunate enough to experience all of this when he met Mo Sher's gaze. At this moment, a white psychokinesis said, "If the commander takes this Easterner to see the general, do you think the general can deal with him?" "I think it's very possible. With the general's strength, the thousands of zombies and vampires outside couldn't break through our walls." "I agree. This Easterner is indeed very strong, but compared to the general, he's too weak." At the same time, when Mo Sher was passing through the long and narrow street, the civilians saw Mo Sher, an Easterner, being taken to the general. They all shook their heads and sighed. Mo Sher paid attention to the expressions and demeanor of these civilians. He felt that these people seemed to be in awe of the general. At the same time, when these people looked at him, some had a trace of sympathy, while others had a sneer on their faces. This made Mo Sher feel that if he was taken to the general, he would be killed in minutes. However, Mo Sher didn't care. In this world, there was nothing that could kill him. Even if the general was really strong enough to kill him, his consciousness could instantly leave his body and go into the body of the sea dragon clone. While Mo Sher was thinking, a Chinese woman on the side of the road suddenly shouted to Mo Sher in Chinese. "Don't go! Don't go to see the general! You must not go!" Mo Sher turned his head and glanced at the woman, but didn't pay much attention to her. However, he was already sure that the general's strength should be extraordinary, and it seemed that the entire base was afraid of him. 2 minutes later, Mo Sher was taken to Central Park. Central Park was huge. It was about 4 kilometers long and 0.8 kilometers wide. It was a small miracle that there was such a huge park in Twisting Covenant, where skyscrapers were everywhere. This place was once called the Twisting Covenant Lung. It attracted tens of millions of people from all over the world to visit every year. On the lawn in the park, there was a woman with a hot figure, blonde hair, and blue eyes. She was wearing a tight white short-sleeved shirt and denim hot pants. She looked sexy and hot without losing the sunshine of youth. At this time, she was playing golf. In the apocalypse, there was such a leisurely mood. Other than Mo Sure, she was the second. The bald man whispered to Mo Sure. "That's the general." Mo Sure was a little surprised. He quietly activated the blood dragon's eye and looked at the woman. With this look, Mo Sure immediately understood. All the doubts he had along the way were answered. The bald man brought Mo Sure behind the woman. There was a hint of reverence in his tone. "General," an Asian came in from outside the base. He said he wanted to ask for information. The woman didn't turn around. She swung her club and watched as the ball crossed an artificial lake and accurately smashed into a hole more than 100 meters away. Only then did she turn around. She waved at the bald man. The bald man hurriedly lowered his head respectfully and left as if he was escaping. It was as if he would be swallowed alive by the woman behind him if he was a second slower. At this moment, the woman threw the cue to the side. She pulled off the rubber band that tied her hair. Her golden hair immediately spread out like a waterfall. She turned around and carefully sized up Mo Sure. A moment later, she shook her head slightly. "He's a little thin. But his face is not bad. I've always been more patient with men with good faces like you. Ask what you want to know quickly. After you're done, we'll get down to business." Then she reminded him. "You came from outside the high wall. You should have seen the two men who were eaten, right? If you can't satisfy me, then the two of them will be your examples." Seeing this, Mo Sure's eyes were filled with a hint of mockery. He slowly said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll taint your noble bloodline?" Chapter 178. This blonde woman with blue eyes, a hot figure, and a beautiful face. Facing Mo Sure, she directly said, "Ask what you want to ask. After you're done, let's get down to business." Mo Sure had a teasing look on his face. "Aren't you afraid that I'll taint your noble bloodline?" The smile on the woman's face froze. She looked a little surprised and sized up Mo Sure from head to toe. "How can you tell?" Of course, she didn't know that Mo Sure had the blood dragon's eye. He could see through the appearance and see through the woman's identity at a glance. Species, vampire. Level 10 supermutated. Ability, psychic illusion, psychic charm. Because she was from the blood race, everything made sense now. Vampires were stronger than zombies. Therefore, with her here, those zombies didn't dare to rashly attack the base. That was why the nest, which had planned to devour the entire city, didn't continue to expand. And those humans, in front of this powerful level 10 super-mutated vampire, could only submit. Even if she wanted 2 men every night, once the 2 men couldn't satisfy her, they would be thrown outside the high wall to feed the zombies. No one in the entire base dared to resist her. Because without her, the super-mutated zombies outside the high wall could raise their entire base to the ground in just 10 minutes. Of course, Mo Sure naturally wouldn't tell her all this. He simply replied, "Intuition." Hearing this, the female general laughed out loud. She took a few steps closer to Mo Sure and put her slender and fair right arm on Mo Sure's shoulder. "You can actually recognize that I'm a vampire. I'm getting more and more interested in you. Tell me, what do you want to ask?" Mo Sure was a normal man. Facing this woman's seductive eyes and seductive actions, it was impossible for his heart not to ripple. But it was just a ripple. This woman was a vampire. He wasn't that hardcore. Mo Sure looked at the eyes on the woman's beautiful face and said indifferently, "I want to know all the information about the vampire's nest." Hearing this, the woman was a little surprised and joked, "You're a human. Why do you want information about the vampire's nest? Could it be that you want to kill your way into the Blood Clan's lair alone? Wipe out the entire blood race?" Mo Sure's expression was calm as he nodded. "Yes." When the Blood Clan woman heard this, she couldn't help but be startled again. Then, she burst out laughing so hard that she was trembling. He spoke in the tone of a senior. "You're an interesting human. However, Do you really think that you can destroy the 13 ancient blood clans just because your telekinesis is strong? Do you know how powerful Count Dracula is? Do you know that after the blood-breed virus and Virus X combine, they will mutate and have unlimited self-healing abilities and are basically unkillable? You don't know anything, yet you dare to say such big words. Using an old saying from the East, the ignorant are fearless. Emosure shook his head slowly. You talk too much. As he spoke, an incomparably powerful dragon consciousness instantly spread out. Under the sweep of his dragon will, the woman in front of him was like a vase that had been smashed to the ground, shattering with a crash. Then, the surrounding ground, trees, artificial lake, bridges, everything, including the entire Central Park, was shattered. All the fragments quickly turned into green light spots and disappeared. And the scene in front of Emosure had completely changed. At this moment, he was no longer in Central Park. Instead, he was on the second floor of a building in Times Square. In front of him stood a woman. This woman was exactly the same as the woman who had shattered just now. The same hot and sexy, the same youthful sunshine. It turned out that everything just now was an illusion. From the moment the bald black man brought him to the bottom of this building, he had already entered an illusion. However, Emosure's blood dragon's eye could see through the appearance and see the essence. So when he activated the blood dragon's eye, all the illusions were a joke in his eyes. At this moment, the woman standing in front of him was very surprised to see Emosure break free from the illusion. Although she was a blood clan member, she was also a level 8 psychokinesis. And her telekinesis had mutated. She could create illusions. In the illusions she created, no one could break free. Even those level 10 mutated blood clan members couldn't do it. How did this human break free? However, the surprise on her face was quickly concealed. Her blue eyes looked at Emosure sincerely. Her eyes were filled with tears. She said pitifully, "Sorry, I didn't want to either. I was forced. Can you forgive me?" As she spoke, she emitted a fatal charm. Compared to before, the temptation was 100 times stronger. Under this fatal temptation, her mouth was already in front of Emosure's neck. At the same time, the 4 teeth in her mouth slowly turned sharp. At the same time, a hint of killing intent suddenly flashed in the endless charm in her eyes. She had used this move to kill countless humans. However, at this moment, she heard a faint sigh from this Eastern man. She couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. Wasn't this man already bewitched by her? What was the meaning of this sigh? At this moment, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her brain. It was so painful that she almost lost consciousness. She didn't have time to think and suddenly bit Emosure's neck. Ding ding. 2 soft sounds, as if she had bitten a piece of iron. No, with her strength, even if it was a piece of iron, she could bite through it. But her sharp teeth couldn't pierce through this human skin. This woman was completely shocked. The teeth of the blood clan members were originally like sharp swords, invincible. The only thing that couldn't be pierced was the level 10 mutated body of Vajra. Could it be that this human strength had reached the level 10 mutated level? In shock, the clothes on her back were instantly torn apart. A pair of huge wings protruded from her back. On the wings, the sharp claws directly pierced toward Emosure's eyes. However, at this moment, swish, a ray of icy blue light flashed. The woman's head flew up in an instant and flew far away. At the same time, her body was quickly frozen. Along with the entire room, it was also frozen. Viscous liquid could be seen from the cut on her neck, bubbling non-stop. It was as if porridge was being cooked in an ice jar. At this point, this level 10 mutated blood clan member was dead. Until her death, she couldn't believe that as a level 10 mutated blood clan member, she couldn't even resist in front of this human. She was actually killed in one hit. What happened to having an body of Vajra after reaching the level 10 mutated level? What happened to not dying even if one's head was cut off? Fairy tales were all nonsense. What puzzled her the most was that this human was completely immune to her telekinesis charm. Was he still AF** King Man? At the same time, on the street not far from the building, the bald black man was waiting for instructions. Usually at this time, it wouldn't take long for the man to be stripped naked and thrown out. His mission was to escort this man to the door and throw him out to feed the zombies. However, at this moment, bang! Something suddenly fell in front of him. He instinctively took a step back. He looked down. The moment he saw it, his expression changed drastically. Chapter 179. When the bald black man saw what was beneath his feet, his expression changed drastically. It was a head. The head that was sealed in ice. Through the crystal ice he could see the head inside. It was the general's head. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the second floor. He was waiting for the man to be stripped naked and thrown down. However, the man did not come down, but the general's head was thrown down. That man's strength was actually so strong? Was he able to break through the general's illusions and enchantment? Could he break the general's invincible Vajra body? There was another problem. Wasn't he a psychokinesis? Psychokinesis was strong, but his body was just an ordinary person's body. Once other powerful creatures got close to him, he could only wait for his death. However, he was in front of the general just now. Not only did he not die, but the general's head was thrown down. What was going on? Aside from all these questions, there was still the biggest one. If the general was dead, who would suppress the thousands of infected creatures outside the base? This was the thing that scared him the most. Thinking of this, he quickly turned around and ran in the direction of the hunter group. However, after running a few steps, he stopped. Then, he turned around and picked up the general's head that had been frozen. The hunter group's headquarters. A few members were joking. How long do you think that Easterner can last? I think he'll be thrown out in 10 minutes at most. Of course. Even the hunters couldn't satisfy the general. It would be strange if he could. Just as they were talking, the leader had already entered the headquarters. A hunter saw the leader enter and shook his head with a smile. Looks like I overestimated that Easterner. It didn't even take 10 minutes. Another psychokinesis said, nonsense. Of course. Although we psychics have powerful telekinesis, our bodies are still that of ordinary people. How can an ordinary person's body withstand the general's powerful body? Someone saw the bald black man holding an ice ball in his hand and asked in confusion, Leader, where did the ice come from? It's not summer yet. It shouldn't be that hot. A hunter took the ice ball from the leader's hand as he spoke. However, as soon as he took the ice ball, his expression changed. He threw the ice cube away. Everyone was stunned when they saw this. He took a closer look at the rolling ice block. That is a human head. The general's head. What's going on? Oh my God, the general is dead. Everyone exclaimed in disbelief. At the same time, on the second floor of a building in Times Square. After Mo Sure killed the general, he said in his mind, System, sign in. The system's voice suddenly sounded frowny face sign in successful. Sign in event. Killed level 10 super mutant vampire mutant psychokinesis. Sign in reward. Dragon will illusion, dragon will charm. Mo Sure looked at the first skill. Dragon will illusion. Creates an illusion using dragon will to confuse the enemy. Mo Sure nodded slightly. This skill was quite useful. As for the second skill, dragon's charm, forget it, let's not talk about it. She couldn't possibly ask him to use his beauty to trick her, right? No man would do such a thing. Then, Mo Sure flipped through this woman's memories. Through these two memory plundering, Mo Sure discovered that after these creatures reached level 10, perhaps because their brain cells were already strong to a certain extent, every time he used memory plundering on them, they wouldn't become idiots. From this woman's memories, he knew that this woman was a vampire who walked out of Castle Dracula. She wasn't the general of the base. Her twin sister was. When she was 5 years old, she was captured by the vampires and transformed into one. However, although she became a vampire, a 5-year-old girl tasted fear and loneliness in that dark, gloomy, and cold castle. Later, she went through a lot of hardships and escaped from the castle. Finally, she found her parents and sister. In the end, her parents and sister hated her because she was a vampire and chased her out of the house. Since then, her temperament had changed drastically. After returning to the castle, she absorbed a large amount of human blood. In the end, she grew into a level 10 super mutant vampire. She also awakened her psychokinesis and even mutated it. Thus, she came back again. She wanted to take revenge on her parents and sister. This was also the reason why she became like this. From her psychokinesis, Mo Shi knew that her sister was actually locked up on the third floor of this building. Mo Shi walked up the stairs and slowly reached the third floor. On the third floor, a woman who looked exactly like the general was chained up. However, this woman wasn't as sexy and youthful as the general. She looked like she was 20 years older than the general. Her blonde hair was disheveled. Her originally beautiful blue eyes were now devoid of any spirit. The blood dragon's eye looked over. Species, vampire. Level 0/level 10 psychokinesis. Ability, psychokinesis illusion, psychokinesis charm. This woman was transformed into a vampire by her sister. However, she insisted on not sucking human blood. So until now, she was still a level 0 vampire. It was also because she insisted on not sucking human blood that she was tortured every day. Almost every moment, her will was in a battle with her bloodlust. In such a battle, her psychokinesis grew much faster than ordinary psychokinesis. This allowed her to reach level 10 psychokinesis. When the woman saw Mo Shi appear, a bloodthirsty light suddenly appeared in her eyes. She even lowered her body, as if she was going to pounce on him at any moment. However, this bloodthirsty light was soon replaced by rationality. She quickly shrank into a corner, the chains on her body rattling. She hugged her knees tightly with both hands and let out a squeak that sounded like a bat's, but it was American English. "Don't come over. Don't come near me. Go. Otherwise, you'll die." Mo Shi's dragon will moved. Crash. The chain was forcefully torn apart. His current dragon will had already reached a level where he could easily tear apart chains. The woman was stunned and looked up at Mo Shi. "You?" Mo Shi spoke slowly. "Emma, you're free." The woman was stunned. She raised her head and looked at Mo Shi in surprise. Mo Shi didn't pay any more attention to this woman. He turned around and walked downstairs. Previously, he knew from Emma's sister's memory that her sister brought human blood to her almost every day. She forced her to drink human blood. But she refused. It was because he knew this that Mo Shi let her go. Emma's dark blue eyes flickered. She asked, "Are you going to Castle Dracula?" Mo Shi nodded. Yes. The bloodthirsty light in Emma's eyes was replaced by determination. "Can you take me with you?" Mo Shi naturally knew why she wanted to go to Castle Dracula. He nodded calmly. Yes. Chapter 180. Mo Shi took the woman and slowly walked down from the third floor to the second floor. The woman looked at the second floor that was completely frozen, and then she saw her sister's headless body that was sealed in ice. Tears glistened in her blood-red eyes. Mo Shi paused for a moment. He waited for the woman to say goodbye to her sister. Then he went downstairs. He walked towards the entrance of the base. The woman quickly wiped her tears and followed Mo Shi's footsteps. The civilians had already heard the news of the general's death. They looked at the Asian man with shock and fear in their eyes. When the Asian man was brought to the general, none of them thought that he would be able to leave here alive. After all, the general was not only a level 10 super mutant vampire, but also a level 8 psychokinesis. In their eyes, the general was invincible. But now the Asian man came down alive and well, while the general died an unnatural death. No matter how imaginative they were, they couldn't figure out how the Asian man could kill the general. But this wasn't the biggest problem now. It was another problem. Now that the general was dead, who would deter the infected creatures outside? Emma, who was behind Mo Shi, suppressed the urge to rush towards these humans. Because it was too difficult, her voice trembled slightly. She asked Mo Shi, "My sister is dead, who will stop these infected creatures?" There were people in the world who gradually turned evil and perverted after being treated unfairly. There were also people who were still kind to humans no matter how much pain they had suffered. Emma obviously belonged to the latter. Mo Shi didn't answer and continued to walk forward. In the entire base, in the entire hunter group, no one dared to stop him from leaving. The people on both sides of the street also kept silent. Even those who had sneered and ridiculed Mo Shi quietly lowered their heads at this moment. They were afraid that Mo Shi would take revenge on them. A powerful being who could kill the general, if he wanted to take revenge, it wasn't something small people like them could bear. At this moment, an ear-piercing alarm sounded in the base. Beep, beep, Beep! At the same time, a loudspeaker sounded. The infected creatures are attacking the high walls of the base. A super mutant zombie has rushed into the base. The announcer's words were extremely hurried. They're coming. Close the doors and windows. Those who can, immediately go underground and hide. Ah, no! Amidst the screams, the announcer's voice abruptly stopped. At the same time, the roar of a zombie came from the loudspeaker. Roar! Roar! In the base, when the 100,000 people heard the roar, they were all terrified. On the streets, people scattered in all directions. In the building, people locked all the doors and windows. The entrance to the underground sanctuary was the scene of a disaster. A large number of people rushed to the entrance of the shelter, but they could not squeeze in at all. From time to time, humans would be trampled to the ground, their bones broken. There were cries, screams, and curses all over the place. At the same time, at the gate of the high wall, boom! The door collapsed with a loud crash. The infected creatures outside the door immediately rushed in like a tide. These infected creatures had previously been suppressed by the general to suppress their bloodlust. Now that the general was dead, their thirst for blood was like a flood breaking through a dam. Behind Emma saw this and quickly spread out her level 10 telekinesis. Level 10 telekinesis was enough to tear these infected creatures apart. However, only ordinary zombies could not be resurrected after being torn apart. For those stronger mutated zombies, even if their heads were thrown off, they could still survive. As for the higher-level super-mutated zombies, they were not afraid of telekinesis at all. A level 2 super-mutated zombie, seeing that this woman was so strong, roared from its throat, "Psychokinesis?" Then, it directly pounced on Emma. Emma wanted to use telekinesis to block it, but from the other side, 2 more super-mutated zombies pounced. With her telekinesis, blocking one super-mutated zombie was already very difficult. Not to mention 3. But at this moment, the 3 super-mutated zombies that had just pounced in front of Emma suddenly exploded without warning. Boom boom boom. With 3 consecutive sounds, the 3 super-mutated zombies exploded into 3 clouds of blood mist. Emma was only slightly stunned. Then, she looked up at the man in front of her. She naturally knew that it must be this man's doing. But why was this man so strong? She was already at level 10 psychokinesis, but she was far from being able to do this. But this man dealt with it so easily. Could it be that this man's realm had really reached a higher realm than level 10 psychokinesis? But her surprise had just begun. She saw the infected creatures that were pouring into the base like a flood. When they pounced on this side, they suddenly melted one by one. Like melted chocolate, after falling to the ground, they turned into a pile of meat paste. When she used her telekinesis to explore the surroundings, she found that it was not only these infected creatures that were pouring into the base. Including the thousands of infected creatures around the base, they were also melting quickly. After melting, they quickly gathered in the direction of the Central Park. This made her even more amazed by this Asian man in front of her. This man's telekinesis was so strong. He was so strong that it was far beyond her imagination and understanding. In extreme shock, she could not help but ask, "What is the realm above level 10 psychokinesis?" Emma walked forward and said, "Psychic Master." Emma asked again, "Then, you are a Psychic Master?" Emma shook his head. "No." Then, he did not say anything and continued to walk forward. Emma's doubts in her heart deepened. If this man was not a Psychic Master, could it be a realm higher than that? Then what was it? At the same time in the base, these humans originally thought that they were going to die today. But at this moment, they suddenly saw the zombies that were pouncing on them melt into meat paste. They were all inexplicably horrified. "Oh, *T, this is so *ing disgusting. Why did these zombies suddenly melt? They are still moving after melting. What the hell?" But for them, they were still very excited that they had survived when they were about to receive their lunchboxes. At the same time, someone saw through the gaps of the high-rise buildings in the direction of the Central Park. There, a huge blood-red figure was slowly condensing and taking shape. "Oh my God, what is that? A giant? A blood-red giant. Don't tell me it's another powerful infected creature." Just as they were wondering, the twisted flesh of more than 8 million infected creatures had slowly condensed and taken shape in the Central Park. The huge blood Buddha that was 1,000 meters tall appeared again. Chapter 181. All the infected creatures in Manhattan, other than those below supermutation, were turned into flesh and blood and condensed into blood Buddhas. However, the 1 million infected creatures in Manhattan were far from enough. Under the shroud of Mo Sher's draconic will, all the 8 million infected creatures in the 5 administrative districts, as long as their level was below supermutation, were all melted into meat paste. They were quickly wriggling toward Manhattan. Gradually, more than 10 minutes later, in the morning fog, a blood-red blood Buddha that was 1,000 meters tall appeared in Central Park. Due to the morning fog, people could not see the upper half of it. However, the sudden appearance of the blood Buddha still shocked everyone. Oh my God, it's taller than the Freedom Tower. What the hell is this thing? If this is an infected creature, then our base is finished. Fear and despair rose in the hearts of the Westerners in the base. However, a few Chinese people recognized the giant's image. This is a Buddha? But Buddhas should be golden. Why is this blood red? A blood Buddha actually appeared among the infected creatures? This is unlikely. Could it be related to the compatriot who just came today? At the same time, Mo Sher's consciousness had already transferred into the blood Buddha clone. From 1,000 meters high, he looked down at the ground covered by the morning fog. This feeling of looking down on the common people made the trace of understanding in his heart increase a little. The draconic will also rapidly strengthened. Controlling the huge blood Buddha clone, he slowly turned his head and looked at the virus hive on the other side of the city. From this angle, the virus hive was like a huge frog with a huge mouth that was about to swallow the remaining half of the city. Mo Sher did not use the blood handprint. He had to save this move for other uses later. He controlled the huge blood Buddha and raised its right foot. It brazenly stepped on the virus hive. Rumble. It was as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was cracking. In the base, everyone felt the earth shake. The surrounding skyscrapers also shook violently. Everyone was shocked. Earthquake. Fortunately, the shaking only lasted for a few seconds. Soon, calm was restored. On the other side of the city, it was not calm at all. Under the foot of the blood Buddha, the virus hive that covered half of the city collapsed. Above the mother nest, the tens of thousands of tumors exploded. Blood immediately gushed out. In the broodmother's nest, all the blood vines and tentacles in the huge blood pool that occupied half of the city were trembling in pain at this moment. The Sanguisurincus wanted to extend upwards in an attempt to repair the nest. However, they were only able to extend halfway before they quickly withered away. When the tentacles saw this, they did not dare to extend any further. Instead, they quickly retracted back into the ground. However, just like the Sanguisurincus, they quickly shriveled up halfway. In the end, he stopped moving. This was because the blood in their bodies had been sucked dry. At the same time, the blood in the blood pool in the broodmother's nest was rushing towards the giant foot of the blood Buddha. They merged into the giant foot. Then, with giant foot as the center, all the infected trees, flowers, and Sanguisurincus in the half of the city that was infected quickly shriveled. Not only did the blood Buddha absorb the flesh and blood of all the infected animals, but it also absorbed the blood of all the infected plants. With the absorption of the blood, with Buddha's giant foot as the center, the color of all the infected plants in the surroundings quickly turned from blood red to dark red. After another 10 minutes, the blood Buddha had reached a height of 1,300 meters. At this time, Mo Sher's consciousness was in the blood Buddha. He looked down at the earth and looked up at the sky. He had a feeling that he was the only one in the world. In this feeling, his dragon mind continued to rise. He controlled the blood Buddha and turned to look at the northern part of New York. That was the St. Lawrence River. On the river, there were more than 1,800 islands of various sizes. This was the Thousand-Island Lake of America. On one of the islands called Hart Island, there was an ancient castle. Bolt Castle. Mo Sher moved his mind and controlled the 1,300-meter-tall blood Buddha to take a step. He took a step. Rumble. Several skyscrapers collapsed with a loud rumble. He took another step. Several more skyscrapers collapsed. Soon, the blood Buddha's giant foot stepped into the St. Lawrence River. Plop. Huge waves rose up from the river. At the same time, on Hart Island, in Bolt Castle, This was the lair of the Johnson family, one of the 13 great families of the blood breeds. There were more than 3,000 blood breeds living in the castle all year round. At the same time, there were more than 30,000 blood breeds living on the islands of various sizes around Heart Island. There were more than 100,000 zombies around these blood breeds. At the same time, in Bolt Castle, the ancestor of the Johnson family had just summoned 2 of his clansmen. He instructed the 2 clansmen, "Just now, Count Dracula sent me a message. He said that he sensed that something had happened to his goddaughter, Irene. Irene has always been among the humans of the Manhattan base. You 2 rush over immediately and investigate the situation. Remember, this is Count Dracula's order." The 2 clansmen's expressions immediately turned cold. A mission personally given by Count Dracula was no small matter. The 2 of them hurriedly bowed solemnly and elegantly. "Yes, grandfather." Just as he said this, someone suddenly barged in from outside the door. "Lord Johnson, bad news, bad news." Ancestor Johnson frowned and reprimanded. "How many times have I said that even in the face of pressure, we must maintain our elegance? This is Count Dracula's teaching. Have you all forgotten?" The blood breeds hurriedly said, "Yes. I'm sorry." Then, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "Lord Johnson, a blood-colored giant more than 1,000 meters tall has appeared outside. It's coming toward our castle." Hearing this, Ancestor Johnson's heart trembled. Even though he had lived for hundreds of years, he had never heard of a giant more than 1,000 meters tall. This matter was definitely not a small matter. On his back, a pair of wings quickly tore the clothes on his back apart. He directly jumped out of the window. Flapping his wings, he flew into the air. Seeing this, the blood breeds who reported the news were slightly stunned. "Wait, didn't they say that we must maintain our elegance even in the face of pressure? Ancestor, you're tearing clothes and jumping out of the window. That's not very good." Ancestor Johnson flew to the sky above the castle. He looked forward. He saw a giant more than 1,000 meters tall stepping on the river and striding toward the castle. With every step he took, a huge wave appeared in the river. When he stepped down, he could even see the silt at the bottom of the river. In particular, that giant more than 1,000 meters tall was emitting a monstrous demonic aura. Even as a blood breeds who had lived for hundreds of years, he had never seen such a terrifying demonic aura. He had been to Castle Dracula several times. But even the demonic aura of Castle Dracula was far from being comparable to the demonic aura of this blood-colored giant. Chapter 182. Demonic aura was also known as blood aura. Ordinary people couldn't see or feel it. Only those corpse hunters, psychokinesis, zombies, and blood clan could feel it. Only those extremely powerful creatures could produce blood aura. It was the matter in the cells in the body that naturally spread into the space. The stronger the strength, the thicker the blood aura. At this moment, the blood aura emitted from the huge blood-colored giant's body covered the sky and the sun. Ancestor Johnson felt a chill in his heart just by looking at it. Such a powerful creature was definitely not something he could resist. He quickly issued an order to all his clansmen. "All blood clan members, run." At the same time, he issued an order to all the zombies around the blood clan members. "All zombie servants, go up and hold it back." He knew very well that in front of such a powerful existence, it was impossible to escape just by running. Only by letting the 100,000 zombies around them delay it for half a minute would they have a chance to escape. Although all the zombies around them were unwilling to do so, they didn't dare to do it. However, they were afraid of Ancestor Johnson's methods. They could only brace themselves and plan to go up. At the same time, the clothes on the backs of all the 30,000 blood clan members in Johnson's family were torn apart. They flapped their wings and flew into the air. More than 30,000 blood clan members fled together. This scene was like the scene of those African birds taking off from the water at the same time in the animal world. It was spectacular. However, just as they flew off the ground, they discovered something strange. They saw that the 100,000 zombies that were originally facing the blood-colored giant. At this moment, they were all torn apart in an instant. Hiss, hiss, hiss. More than 100,000 zombies were torn apart at the same time. The scene was like hell. The entire river was instantly dyed blood red. At the same time, The torn flesh did not fall to the ground. Instead, it was condensed by some kind of power. It quickly twisted into a chain made of flesh and blood. This blood-red chain was actually more than 3 meters thick. Both ends were in the shape of anchors. However, they were sharper than anchors. One of them was nailed directly to the ancient castle at an extremely fast speed. It pierced through the thick roof of the ancient castle, the ground, and the foundation of the ancient castle. It pierced deeply into the foundation of the ancient castle. The other end split into thousands of blood chains that were as thick as an arm. The tip of each blood chain had barbs that looked like anchors. In the next moment, the tens of thousands of blood chains shot towards the 30,000 blood tribe members. Chi, a blood chain instantly pierced through a vampire's shoulder and hooked onto his chest. He wanted to struggle, but he found that the barbs had already pierced deeply into his flesh. Not only that, after the barbs pierced into his body, hundreds and thousands of tentacles grew out in an instant. Deeply rooted in his body. If he wanted to forcibly pull out the chains made of flesh and blood from his body, he would be able to do so. Then there was only one way: to tear himself to pieces. At the same time, the same thing was happening to the other 30,000 members of the Blood Clan. All of the vampires were pierced by the blood-colored chains. The barbs pierced into his flesh. No matter how they struggled, they could not break free from the blood-red chains. Demon binding rope. How could they possibly break free? Even Patriarch Johnson, who was the strongest among them, had his back pierced by a blood-colored chain that was as thick as a thigh. Hundreds and thousands of blood-colored tentacles grew out of the blood-colored chains. They were like blood vessels that drilled into every part of his flesh and blood. Patriarch Johnson was shocked. He tried to pull and cut with his knife, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not break free from the chains. The chains seemed to grow inside his body. This was the overbearing power of the demon binding rope. It ignored levels. Of course, the higher the level of Mo Sure, the shorter the time they could control him. For example, Patriarch Johnson could only control him for 3 minutes at most. However, 3 minutes was enough. The huge blood Buddha was already 1,000 meters away from the ancient castle. In the next moment, the blood Buddha slowly raised his right hand. All the flesh and blood in his body began to gather toward the blood palm. In the end, it turned into a huge blood palm that was 5,500 meters long and 3,200 meters wide, floating in the air. It was like a huge blood-red cloud that covered the sky and the sun. When the vampires saw this, they were all extremely frightened. His face, which was already pale, became even paler. Patriarch Johnson felt it even more strongly. He frantically tore at the blood-red chains on his back and tore off a large piece of flesh. However, the chains seemed to have taken root in his body. All the tentacles had drilled into every corner of his body like blood vessels. Unless he tore himself into pieces, he would not be able to break free in a short period of time. He could only watch as the huge bloody palm slammed down towards the ground. Boom! The blood palm pressed down like a mountain. It slapped on the ancient castle in the center of the river. Immediately, a shockwave spread out. The river water was directly cut off by the huge palm. The speed of the river water downstream instantly increased by hundreds of times. It surged up from both sides. The river water upstream directly flowed backward under the shockwave. All the trees within a radius of more than 50 kilometers were constantly broken under the impact of the shockwave. After the shockwave, only a 5,500 meters long, 3,300 meters wide, and 5 meters deep giant blood-red palm print was left. The river water crazily poured into the palm print. As for the vampires from the Johnson family, without exception, they were all smashed into meat paste by the huge palm. In the distant sky, Missouri Sure's wings flapped lightly as he floated in the air. A hint of understanding flashed through his heart. He could feel that as long as he did it again, his dragon will would be able to break through. At the same time, on a building not far from him. When Emma saw this scene, the shock in her heart was vividly displayed on her face. After a long while, she withdrew her gaze from the huge blood palm and turned to look at Mo Sure not far away. A human could be so powerful. For an ordinary human, a level 10 super-mutated zombie that was impossible to defeat was simply a matter of a kick in front of him. The mother nest that was so huge that it almost swallowed the entire city was just a matter of a kick in front of him. And now, the Johnson family and more than 30,000 vampires were just a matter of a palm in front of him. And looking at this Eastern man's appearance, He seemed to be at ease. How could a human's strength be so strong? Sure closed his eyes slightly and carefully recalled the feeling when he used the Blood Buddha avatar just now. After a long while, he slowly opened his eyes. Then, he grabbed the shoulder of the woman not far away and flew toward the northwest. At the same time in the Manhattan base, almost everyone was in a state of extreme shock. Chapter 183. When Sure left with Emma, in the Manhattan base. Those people thought that without the deterrence of the general, those zombies would madly kill their way into the base. The nest would also engulf the entire city, and all of them would be unable to escape. However, more than 10 minutes had passed, and they didn't see any danger except for 2 earthquakes. The terrifying zombies that they expected didn't appear. Amidst the confusion, the bald black captain led a few people from the hunting group to the skyscraper in the base and looked at the entire city. With this look, someone immediately noticed the abnormality. "Captain, look over there, the nest has disappeared." Everyone looked in the direction he was pointing and looked at the other side of the city. Indeed, as he said, the nest that originally occupied half of the city had long disappeared. Moreover, the previous half of the city was blood red. At this time, all the Sanguisurincus turned dark red as if they were dead. The streets that were originally densely packed with zombies were now empty, and not even a shadow of a ghost could be seen. It seemed that the infected creatures in the entire city seemed to have been wiped out. This was done by that Easterner? The general was able to intimidate all infected creatures. That Easterner killed the general. Then, they couldn't think of anyone else who could do all this except that Easterner. How did that Easterner do it? Unbelievable. I don't dare to imagine. The mysterious power from the East is really not something that we can understand. Sure left the Twisted Pact and headed west. In the following day, he annihilated another 3 blood-breed clans. Signing in the ancient castles of these vampire clans was quite rewarding. The only regret was that these vampire castles were too far away from the big cities, and there weren't many zombies. He couldn't condense the Blood Buddha avatar. However, there were still billions of zombies in the world. As long as he was willing, he could find a big city to condense the Blood Buddha avatar at any time. At the same time, far away in Romania's Castle Dracula, in a dark hall, on the main seat, a person was sitting. The person's face couldn't be seen clearly, but in the darkness, he was sitting very upright. Next to him was a glass of red wine. The dim candlelight in the castle shone on the red wine, giving off an intoxicating glow. Although he was in the dark, even the darkness could not conceal his elegant temperament. In the middle of the hall, there were 6 zombies standing with their hands down. There were black zombies, white zombies, African zombies, European zombies, and American zombies. Although all 6 of them were zombies, they looked no different from ordinary people. The 6 of them were the kings of zombies all over the world. Count Dracula took the red wine next to him and swirled it slowly. The reflection of the candlelight in the wine glass began to ripple. A moment later, he slowly opened his mouth. Some time ago, the king of zombies in Asia was killed. Another 5 Blood Clan clans have been destroyed in the past few days. According to the intelligence, all of this was done by an Eastern human. Your mission is to kill that Asian at all costs. Of course, the 6 zombie kings had heard about it long ago. At this moment, in front of Count Dracula, he did not dare to be the slightest bit negligent. They quickly replied in unison, "Yes, Your Excellency." Count Dracula exhorted again. That human can destroy 5 of our Blood Clan clans. His strength must not be underestimated. You must act with caution. The 6 zombie kings once again replied in unison. "Yes, Your Excellency." On this day, Sure was not far from Castle Dracula. From the memory of a previous Blood Clan member, he knew that there was a mountain near Castle Dracula. On that mountain, there was a legend about a dragon. This aroused his interest even more. Originally, he planned to destroy all 13 Blood Clan clans first, and then concentrate on dealing with Count Dracula. But now he changed his mind. After the past few days, he had become more confident in his strength. None of the Blood Clan members could withstand a single blow from him. And at this time, the Blood Slaves had already investigated the situation of Castle Dracula clearly. So there was nothing to worry about. He could just kill his way to Castle Dracula. At night, he came to a meadow by a lake. Mo Sure planned to rest after setting up the virtual sentry tower. Emma reminded him worriedly. You destroyed so many castles of the Blood Clan. They may come for revenge tonight. Mo Sure yawned and nodded. Yeah. Emma was puzzled. You're not worried? Mo Sure nodded again. Yeah. Seeing Mo Sure's appearance, Emma really didn't take it to heart. She asked again, what if Count Dracula comes in person? Mo Sure smiled. That would be interesting. Emma was puzzled. Why was this Eastern man so confident? When her sister was still alive, she often talked about Count Dracula. She always said, that's the most powerful humanoid creature in the world. She wondered who was stronger between Count Dracula and this human. As night fell, Mo Sure lay on his back on the grass, looking at the boundless starry sky. His thoughts fluctuated. A moment later, the sound of the virtual sentry tower suddenly rang in his mind. Beep, beep, beep. Mo Sure scanned with his dragon's mind. He immediately discovered that 100 kilometers away from him, 6 figures were running over quickly. The blood dragons I connected to the sentry tower and quickly checked the levels of these 6. Species, zombie, zombie king. Level 10 supermutated. Mo Sure couldn't help but smile. He had thought that these 6 zombie kings were scattered all over the world, which would be a little troublesome. He didn't expect them to come over together. This saved him a lot of trouble. Not long after, the 6 zombie kings appeared in Mo Sure's vision. Without any unnecessary nonsense, the 6 zombie kings had already surrounded Mo Sure and Emma. The 6 zombie kings condensed 6 different weapons on their right arms. There were knives, spears, swords, and whips. There was even a zombie king whose entire right arm was split into 4 pieces. It was like a big flower had bloomed. However, the petals of this big flower were all sharp teeth. They directly bit at Mo Sure. The attacks of these zombie kings were extremely fast. They almost instantly arrived in front of Mo Sure. And they had a clear division of labor. 4 zombie kings attacked Mo Sure, and the other 2 attacked Emma directly. Of course, their main goal wasn't to take Emma's life. Instead, they used this to distract Mo Sure. In their opinion, since this human had brought this vampire along for so long, he must be very concerned about this vampire. Therefore, this vampire was this human's weakness. Chapter 184. Among the 6 super mutant zombies, 4 of them attacked Mo Sure directly. Their attacks directly enveloped the area within a kilometer around Mo Sure. The area was covered by the light of all kinds of knives, swords, spears, and whips. Mo Sure had nowhere to hide. Mo Sure didn't hide. In fact, he didn't need to hide at all. A layer of blood-red scales quickly appeared on the surface of his body. A blood-red dragon-shaped helmet instantly formed on his head. Ding, 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 ding. Several ear-piercing sounds rang out from his dragon blood armor. Sparks kept appearing on his dragon blood armor. At this moment, Mo Sure didn't move at all. The dragon blood armor completely absorbed the huge power of these people's attacks. As a result, Mo Sure just stood there and swayed slightly. The 4 zombie kings all changed their expressions. Their attacks could even injure a level 10 super mutant zombie with an invincible body. The scale armor on this human's body actually had such a strong defensive power? The so-called invincible body didn't really mean that it could defend against all attacks. If they met someone stronger than them, such as Count Dracula, they could easily tear apart the invincible body. As level 10 super mutant zombies and zombie kings, their full-strength attacks might not be able to tear apart the invincible body. But at least they could injure it. And now, the armor on this human's body was even stronger than the invincible Vajra body. Of course, they didn't know that the dragon blood armor's defense could defend against any attack on Earth. Not to mention them, even if Count Dracula himself came, he would not be able to break through the defense. While they were still in shock, Mo Sure moved his right hand slightly. A blood-red machete appeared in his hand. Dark Ice Devil Slayer. With the 6 zombie kings' powers, the moment they saw the blood-red blade, they knew that it was not a simple weapon. If this human attacked with this machete, even they would have a hard time dealing with it. Their only chance of winning now was the female blood race. Two zombie kings had already caught Emma. They hissed in their throats, "Put down your weapon or we'll kill this woman." Before he finished speaking, Emo suddenly turned around. The dark ice devil slaying blade in his hand hacked down at a zombie king behind him. Seeing this, the zombie king was shocked. He quickly raised the long saber in his hand to meet the attack. Chi-chi, two soft sounds were heard. The zombie king was cut into two halves along with its blade. At the same time, the zombie king's body was frozen. Furthermore, with him as the center, the frozen area was rapidly expanding. Almost in the blink of an eye, it reached the feet of the other three zombie kings. Ka. The bodies of the three zombie kings were frozen in an instant. The remaining two zombie kings, who were holding their weapons against Emma's neck, were shocked. They originally thought that once they subdued this female vampire, this human would have some misgivings and wouldn't dare to make another move. At the very least, even if he wanted to play tricks, he would have to go through the process. But he never expected that this human would have no scruples at all. In fact, he didn't even hesitate in the slightest and instantly attacked. In this way, the zombie kings were caught off guard. They didn't know Emo's character. Although this Emma had something to do with him, it wasn't a big deal. The reason why he brought her along was because this woman was related to the place near Castle Dracula, where the legend said that a giant dragon had once appeared. That was all. How could he be subdued because of her? Taking a step back. Even if this Emma had more to do with him, as long as she wasn't as close as he was with Happy, he would definitely not hesitate to attack. After all, he had always believed in one sentence in his heart. In the apocalypse, survival was the way to go. To be subdued and even lose his life for a woman who had little to do with him. He would never do such a stupid thing. At this time, the two vampires saw that the ice had already reached their feet. They quickly jumped and instantly jumped 100 meters into the air. At the same time, on their backs, wings tore through their clothes and stretched out. Everyone's wings were more than 5 meters wide. But when they flapped their wings and tried to escape, they found that their feet seemed to be pulled by something, and they couldn't escape at all. When they looked down, they saw that their feet were wrapped by a sanguisurincus as thick as an arm. At this time, below the sanguisurincus, the ice had quickly spread along the sanguisurincus. The two vampires' expressions changed drastically. They flapped their wings frantically, and at the same time, their arms turned into sharp blades, trying to cut off the sanguisurincus. However, it was too late. The chi of frost was spreading at an incredible speed. In just 2 seconds, it had spread to their feet. Then it spread to their legs, waists, chests, necks, and heads. In the end, the two vampires were frozen in the air. They looked like two ice kites that were being released. Originally, with the strength of these zombie kings, even if their bodies were surrounded by a 5-meter-thick ice layer, they could still break out of the ice. However, the cold air emitted by the mysterious ice devil slayer was no ordinary cold air. After the surface of their bodies was frozen, the cold air directly entered their bodies through their pores and sweat pores. It froze every single cell in their bodies. Think about it, if every single cell in your body was frozen, how could you still be able to jump around? Moreover, the mysterious ice devil slayer had a strong restraining effect on infected creatures. In order to expel this cold air, in addition to having an extremely terrifying physical strength like Count Dracula, one must have energy in the body. Unfortunately, they didn't have the strength of Count Dracula. Secondly, it was impossible for them to have energy in the body. As a result, the 6 zombie kings could only watch as their bodies were frozen from the inside out. At the same time, the ice layer was still spreading rapidly. The entire lake was frozen in a very short time. A mutant fish had just jumped out of the water and was directly turned into ice. It fell on the ice layer below with a thud. The ice layer continued to spread outwards. Within a radius of 10 kilometers, everything was frozen in just half a minute. Emo's draconic thought swept across, and the 6 zombie kings were directly turned into blood-red ice fragments on the ground. Emo raised the mysterious ice devil slayer and carefully looked at this blood-red curved blade. This was the first time he used the mysterious ice devil slayer at full strength. The effect was not bad. Although in terms of attack range, it was not comparable to the bloody handprint, let alone the draconic thought meteorite. However, in terms of restraining infected creatures, it was definitely not weak. At this time, Emma, who was not far from him, widened her eyes. She looked at the ground that was completely covered in ice in disbelief. Chapter 185. Emma looked at the frozen world. The lake water was frozen, the plants were frozen, and even the mutated birds that were flying in the sky were frozen and fell onto the ice. Her face was filled with disbelief. After a moment, she retracted her gaze and turned to the Asian man in front of her. She had already seen the powerful strength this Asian man had displayed before. No matter how strong this man was, she wouldn't be so surprised if he could destroy a country with one move. But now, with this slash, everything within a radius of 10 kilometers was frozen. She really couldn't understand. This wasn't a magic world, and he wasn't Princess Aisha. How could he freeze everything within a radius of 10 kilometers with one move? She really didn't understand. Emosure really did have the strength to destroy a country with one move. Emosure finished all this as if nothing had happened. He put away the mysterious ice demon slaying blade. Then with a thought, he took out a recliner from his backpack. He placed it on the ice and lay down comfortably. Looking up at the night sky, his eyes reflected the starlight. Emma, who was next to him, was very puzzled by Emosure's ability to make things appear so casually. But she had seen Emosure play like this many times during this period of time, so she was already used to it. Emosure seemed to be looking up at the starry sky at this time, but in fact, he was signing in his mind. System, special event sign in. Sign in successful. Sign in event, kill the Zombie King. Sign in reward, 60 Zombie King crystal cores. Emosure looked at the reward and couldn't help but smile. 60 Zombie King crystal cores were enough for him to advance. He thought that he would waste some time since he hadn't signed in at the Dragon Palace for the past few days. But he didn't expect a pleasant surprise. He didn't have to avoid Emma. With a thought, he took out more than 10 Zombie King crystal cores. Holding them in his palm, they turned into streams of heat and flowed into his body from his palm. After a while, he absorbed all 60 crystal nuclei of the Zombie King. At the same time, his body temperature rose rapidly. After reaching the limit, he stopped for about 5 minutes before his body temperature slowly returned to normal. Breaking through was that simple. Looking at his mind, he saw that his attributes had changed. Name, Emosure. Level 8 Great Hunter, Level 2 Long Yen Sure. Evolution direction, Titan Dragon. He was now a Level 8 Great Hunter, one step closer to the limit of Level 10. Emma, who was not far away, did not know that in such a short time, the Asian man in front of her had increased by one level. She only saw a smile on Emosure's face for a while, and then he seemed to sigh. She had no idea what this man was thinking. The next morning, Emosure took Emma and flew toward Romania. At the same time, in Dracula's castle in Romania, Count Dracula had also received the news. Although the messenger of the Blood Clan couldn't see Count Dracula's face, he could see his elegant and noble figure in the darkness. Earl, the 6 Zombie Kings you sent were all killed by that human being. Count Dracula paused for 2 seconds, a little surprised. I underestimated that human. In Count Dracula's opinion, the Zombie Kings were the most powerful beings in the world besides himself. He thought that it would be easy to send 6 Zombie Kings to kill that human being. He didn't expect that the 6 Zombie Kings would be killed by that human being. But what's done is done. It's just 6 zombies. The messenger of the Blood Clan continued to ask, Earl, he's coming. Count, he's coming to our castle. Should we prepare anything? Count Dracula chuckled and said, What do we need to prepare? Do you think the tens of millions of mutant bats around the castle are just decorations? When the messenger of the Blood Clan heard this, he thought of those mutant bats and felt a chill in his heart. There were tens of millions of mutant bats in the forest around the castle. The individual strength of those mutated bats was not strong. But when tens of millions of mutant bats attacked at the same time, even a level 10 super mutant Blood Clan would be killed in a very short time. He had seen with his own eyes 3 level 10 super mutant Blood Clan offend the Earl. In the end, the Earl ordered tens of millions of mutant bats to attack together. Those 3 level 10 mutant Blood Clan members didn't even last half a minute. Thinking of this, the Blood Clan member quickly lowered his head and replied, No. At the same time, he also thought of Count Dracula's strength. Those tens of millions of mutant bats were so strong, but they were still under Count Dracula's control. It was clear that Count Dracula's strength was stronger than those tens of millions of bats. With those tens of millions of mutant bats and Count Dracula's double insurance, that arrogant human being wanted to attack Castle Dracula was simply wishful thinking. Count Dracula said, "So we don't need to prepare anything. Just wait for that arrogant human to walk into the trap." The messenger of the Blood Clan member nodded. "Yes, Count Dracula." Then he carefully retreated. Until this moment, a pair of blood-red eyes lit up in the darkness. Count Dracula's voice sounded. "I, Count Dracula, have not used my full strength for more than 300 years. The humans in this world have probably forgotten the fear of being dominated by Count Dracula." The next afternoon, Xiaofan brought Emma to Romania. 80 kilometers away from Castle Dracula, Xiaofan floated in the sky. At this moment, the blood slave quietly flew over and landed on Xiaofan's shoulder. Through the dragon telepathic communication, the blood slave had already told him everything about the castle. Xiaofan knew that there was a cave on Mount Sarati behind Castle Dracula. People once said that it was the dragon's lair. But in an earthquake, the entrance to the dragon's lair was shaken and collapsed. But in fact, there was another entrance to the dragon's lair. It was in the wine cellar under Castle Dracula. This was also the reason why Xiaofan traveled so far to attack Castle Dracula. Within a few hundred kilometers around Castle Dracula, there were no cities or zombies. Because Count Dracula felt that those zombies were inferior creatures that would tarnish his castle. But the blood slave had previously detected that there were tens of millions of mutant bats in the forest around Castle Dracula. And these tens of millions of mutant bats were enough to condense into a larger blood Buddha. Thinking of this, Xiaofan was secretly delighted. In his mind, he checked the evolution points. Along the way, he had already accumulated more than 9 billion evolution points. Destroying these tens of millions of mutant bats and destroying Castle Dracula would definitely break through 10 billion points. At that time, the system would be upgraded again, and the rewards would be much more. And his dragon telepathic communication would probably directly break through to level 3. At the same time, he could check in at the dragon's lair, killing many birds with one stone. Chapter 186. Above the forest to the east of Castle Dracula, Xiaofan and Emma flew over slowly. Vampires could be seen flashing past the forest on the ground from time to time. Emma was shocked when she used her telekinesis to investigate. There were more than 100 blood breeds within a radius of 1,000 meters from her. But this was not what surprised her. Castle Dracula was the lair of the vampires, so it was not surprising that there were so many vampires around. What surprised her was that there were hundreds of mutated bats hanging upside down from almost every tree below. And they were all mutated vampire bats. Before they mutated, they lived by sucking blood. Now that they had mutated, their faces were even more ferocious. Their faces looked like those of a wild boar. But they were not as long as a wild boar's nose. 2 long fangs were exposed at the corners of their mouths. Each mutated vampire bat was more than a meter long. Their wingspans were more than 3 meters wide. With so many vampire bats surrounding her, even she, a level 10 psychokinesis, would have a hard time dealing with them. Moreover, this was only the vampire bats within a radius of 1 kilometer. If all the vampire bats in the surrounding forest were added up, there would be millions or even tens of millions of them. Even a level 10 super mutated zombie would not have a complete corpse if it barged in here. However, she turned her head to look at Xiaofan. This Asian man's strength should be able to easily deal with so many mutated vampire bats. And with this Asian man's personality, one slap from him could probably turn the entire area around Castle Dracula into ashes. Thinking of this, she hurriedly said to Xiaofan, who was beside her, "Can you let me go down to find my son first?" The reason why she took the risk to come to Castle Dracula with Xiaofan was that her sister had once taken her son to Castle Dracula for revenge and turned him into a vampire. She came here to find her son. As for the reason why Xiaofan brought her here, it was not because he was touched by the great love of a mother. This woman did make him feel good, but it was far from the point where he would bring her all the way to the lair of the vampires just to find her son. He had brought her here for another reason. Seeing Xiaofan's silence, Emma thought that he didn't agree. She begged, "Please let me go down and look for my son. Just give me half an hour. Whether you can find it or not, Do it when the time is up, okay? Mo sure shook his head. Sometimes, the result may not be as good as you think. Emma was slightly taken aback. This Asian man seemed to know something. Her blood-red eyes flickered slightly. After a while he said with some difficulty, "No matter what the result is, I will accept it." As they spoke, in the forest below, a mutated vampire bat suddenly flapped its wings and flew into the air. Then the second, the third, the fourth. Tens of thousands of blood-sucking bats flapped their wings and flew up. In the entire forest, more than 10 million bats flew up like a swarm of locusts, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Even though Emma had already expected that there might be more than 10 million vampire bats here, she still couldn't help but feel her heart beating wildly at the sight of such a majestic sight. She subconsciously looked at Mo Sure, who was next to her. But she saw that Mo Sure still had an indifferent expression on his face. He was as calm as an ancient well. It was as if it wasn't tens of thousands of vampire bats that flew up, but just a fly. Soon, those tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats gathered in the sky. They actually gathered to form a huge bat pattern. Just think about it. How big would it be if 10 million huge vampire bats, each of which was more than a meter long, formed a gigantic bat pattern in the sky? It would cover the sky and cover the sun. The ground instantly darkened. The whole sky seemed to be occupied by this huge vampire bat. At the same time, a terrifying but elegant voice came from the huge vampire bat. "Easterner, you dare to break into Castle Dracula alone. You are too arrogant." Seeing this, Mo Sure slowly shook his head. This Count Dracula was not only pretending to be mysterious, but also blind. But on the surface, he didn't say anything. Before a fight, he never liked to talk nonsense. If he could fight, he would never talk nonsense. Count Dracula saw that Mo Sure didn't want to talk nonsense with him and seemed a little bored. He said, "I thought that all Easterners liked to be reserved, but I didn't expect you to be different. Since that's the case, then accept the judgment of Count Dracula." Before he finished speaking, the huge bat pattern formed by tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats in the sky flapped its wings slightly and swooped down towards Mo Sure. Because of the flapping of its wings, within a radius of more than 50 kilometers, leaves suddenly flew and dust filled the air. On a nearby lake, there were also huge waves rolling. In the forest, the trees were constantly emitting cracking sounds. Seeing this, Emma's face suddenly changed. Even though she knew that Mo Sure was very strong, she couldn't help but be shocked at this time. After all, when she followed Mo Sure all the way here, she had never encountered such a strong attack. Mo Sure just shook his head slightly, with a thought. In the next moment, she saw the tens of thousands of vampire bats that were rushing towards Mo Sure melt at an extremely fast speed. They turned into tens of thousands of blood-red meat paste and fell from the sky. Pa pa pa, they fell to the ground. It was as if there was a rain of flesh and blood. Within a radius of tens of kilometers, all the trees, grass, and lakes were covered with a layer of flesh and blood in a short period of time. And this flesh and blood carpet was wriggling quickly, slowly condensing into a giant statue. About a minute later, this giant statue finally took shape completely. It was actually a blood Buddha that was about 2,000 meters tall and completely blood-red. The blood Buddha stood between heaven and earth. In heaven and earth, only I am supreme. Its eyes were lowered, looking down on everything as if they were ants. In the hall of the ancient castle not far away, Count Dracula suddenly stood up in the darkness. He looked at the blood Buddha that stood proudly between heaven and earth not far away in surprise. He originally wanted to control these tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats to attack that Easterner. Even if he couldn't kill that human, it could still cause great news to him. When the time came, he would be able to kill this human easily. But he never expected that this human didn't even move, and these tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats were turned into meat paste. And they even condensed into such a huge blood Buddha. Previously, he had heard from his subordinates that the blood Buddha was terrifying. Therefore, he had been mentally prepared for this. The previous 2 times Mo Sure's blood Buddhas were condensed from the flesh and blood of zombies. So he thought that Mo Sure couldn't condense the blood Buddha with the flesh and blood of mutated beasts. And these mutated vampire bats all had the blood of the blood clan flowing in their bodies. Even if that human could really condense the blood Buddha with the flesh and blood of mutated beasts, he didn't think that the human could condense the blood Buddha with the flesh and blood of the blood clan. If it could be condensed, wouldn't it have been condensed long ago? Why wait until now? But he never thought that this was a trick that Mo Shi had left behind to numb him. Chapter 187. Count Dracula didn't expect that Mo Shi still had a trick up his sleeve. In fact, the Blood Buddha avatar could be condensed from the flesh and blood of any infected creature. Mo Shi had only condensed from the flesh and blood of zombies the previous 2 times. Even when he was only 1 step away from condensing the dragon will, he didn't use the flesh and blood of vampires to condense the Blood Buddha avatar. This was to make Count Dracula lower his guard. To make him think that Mo Shi couldn't condense the Blood Buddha with vampires. At this time, the Blood Buddha condensed by Mo Shi was 2,000 meters tall. Mo Shi looked down through the gaps in the clouds from the Blood Buddha's perspective. He saw that the originally huge castle Dracula was now like a castle built by a child with blocks. He moved his mind. The Blood Buddha's right palm slowly raised. The clouds in the surroundings started to move in all directions as the giant palm was raised. At this time, Emma, who was being held by Mo Shi and floating in the air, saw this giant palm, and her heart suddenly sank. If this palm fell, all the vampires would be finished. Her son would be finished too. She wanted to beg Mo Shi not to make a move first. However, based on her understanding of Mo Shi along the way, she knew that this Asian man would never be merciful. She could only cry and look at the castle below with difficulty. At this time on the ground in the forest, there were more than 100,000 vampires. They saw the giant Blood Buddha and the bloody palm in the clouds in the sky, and their faces were full of shock and horror. Even their count doesn't have this kind of strength, right? Furthermore, the gigantic Blood Buddha gave them an extremely strong sense of oppression. Under this extremely strong sense of oppression, they didn't even have the slightest desire to fight. The only thing they wanted to do now was to escape. Almost all of the vampires flapped their wings and wanted to escape. But soon, a giant blood-red chain with a diameter of more than 10 meters appeared in the air. Both ends of the chain were pointed and had barbs. One end was directly nailed to the ground and pierced into it. It plunged deep into the ground. No one knew how deep it was. The other end quickly split into more than 100,000 chains and shot out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it pierced through the bodies of all the Blood Clan members. Even Count Dracula was no exception. At this moment, Count Dracula saw the giant Blood Buddha slowly condense into a giant palm. A trace of shock appeared in his heart. For a mere human to be able to reach such a level of strength was far beyond his imagination. However, at this moment, a blood-red chain suddenly pierced through his body, causing him to be even more horrified. One had to know that his body was dozens of times stronger than the body of a normal level 10 mutated Blood Clan member. He didn't expect his body to be pierced through so easily. In his shock, he hurriedly tugged at the chain, wanting to tear it apart. His strength was immense. However, when he pulled, he was surprised to find that the chain was extremely sturdy. Even he couldn't break it. This brat. Count Dracula was both shocked and angry. He was Count Dracula, the ancestor of the vampires, yet he was being tied up by a lowly human. Unforgivable. Unforgivable. Fortunately, after a moment, the chain in his body seemed to loosen. He pulled hard and forcefully pulled the chain out of his body. Although he also pulled out a fist-sized piece of flesh, it was nothing to him. His wound would heal very quickly. However, he soon discovered that the fist-sized wound on his chest had not healed at all. His self-healing ability seemed to have disappeared. How could this be? Ever since he became a blood breed, his body had an extremely strong self-healing ability. Even if his arms and legs were broken, they could grow back in just a few seconds. Now it was just a hole in his chest, but it couldn't heal. What the hell was this? If it were an ordinary blood breed, they would definitely be terrified and turn around to flee. However, Count Dracula was not a blood breed who would give in easily. The noble blood of the blood breed flowed in his body. How could he admit defeat to a mere human? It was impossible for him to escape. Escape was impossible in this lifetime. He bent his body slightly, and in the next moment, he leaped up. He directly crashed through the roof of the ancient castle. While in the air, his body was rapidly changing. His body was rapidly growing in size. Soon, he reached a height of 100 meters. When he spread his wings, they were more than 500 meters wide. His eyes were blood-red as he looked at the large blood palm that had already formed. An ear-piercing shriek came out of his throat. Squeak! This shriek was obviously a sound wave attack. In his shriek, the clouds in the sky rolled and quickly spread out in all directions. All the blood breeds had their bodies pierced by the demon-binding rope and were originally extremely terrified. However, when they saw the 100-meter-tall Count Dracula, they were all overjoyed. Was the Count finally going to use his full strength? The Count had not used his full strength for hundreds of years. This lowly human did not understand the terror of the Count when he used his full strength. At this moment, the huge blood palm that was 10 kilometers long and nearly 6 kilometers wide was not affected at all by Count Dracula's shriek. It slammed towards the ground. The surrounding sea of clouds churned and surged wildly. Upon seeing this, Count Dracula bellowed in anger. "Lowly human, lowly species, how dare you offend the noble blood breed?" As he spoke, he flew towards the blood palm. Boom! The blood palm came down from the sky and bombarded the ground. Suddenly, a shock wave like a tsunami quickly swept across a radius of hundreds of kilometers. All the trees within hundreds of kilometers were directly torn apart by the tremendous force. All the infected creatures, including the level 10 mutated blood breeds, were directly torn apart by this shockwave. The level 10 mutated blood breeds were originally the strongest beings in the world. Now, they were directly torn apart by the shockwave of the blood palm. This was unimaginable in the past. In this huge shockwave, all the flowers and trees on the ground within a radius of 100 kilometers were directly swept away. Only the bare ground was left. The nearby mountains also seemed to shake violently a few times. Large chunks of mountain rocks rolled down continuously. When the last mountain rock fell, the whole world was finally quiet. Between heaven and earth, only the figures of Xiaofan and Emma were suspended in mid-air. Emma's pair of blue eyes were wide open as she looked at the ground. The ancient castle on the ground had long disappeared. Only a huge palm print that was 10 kilometers long and nearly 6 kilometers wide was left. Looking down from the sky, this palm print was blood-red. It was so red that it seemed as if blood could drip out. It was so red that it made one's hair stand on end. It was so shockingly red. Chapter 188. Under the Palm. The whole world became quiet. Only a huge bloody palm print that was 10 kilometers long was left on the ground. 100,000 members of the blood tribe were all wiped out by this bloody handprint. At this time, Xiaofan closed his eyes slightly. Feeling the enlightenment in his heart just now, his dragon's will was rapidly increasing. It had reached its limit. Thinking back to the time when he turned into a blood Buddha, standing between heaven and earth, seeing everything as ants, observing the energy of heaven and earth. All kinds of feelings in his heart kept surging. Finally, at a certain moment, like a flood breaking through a dam, he broke through his limit. The whole world suddenly became clear. Everything within a radius of 150 kilometers seemed to be under his control. Name, Xiaofan. Level 8 Great Hunter, Level 3 Long Yen Shi. Evolution direction, Titan Dragon. Phew. Xiaofan let out a long breath. The dragon's will had finally increased again. It was too difficult to increase the dragon's will. Of course, in contrast, the strength of the dragon's will was also far beyond imagination. Now that he was level 3 Long Yen Shi, he could easily crush a level 10 Great Psychic who was 7 levels higher. If Count Dracula was in front of him now, Xiaofan could tear his body apart with just the dragon's will. One had to know that Count Dracula had an indestructible body. And it was even stronger than the indestructible body of all the other level 10 supermutant blood breeds. Not to mention ordinary swords, even the genetic weapons of a great hunter would not be able to cause any damage to his body. But now Xiaofan could directly tear his body apart with the dragon's will. It could be seen how violent the level 3 dragon's will was. But then again, dragons were naturally domineering and violent creatures. The dragon's will was naturally much more domineering than the psychic power of humans. At this time, in the huge bloody palm print, a piece of soil suddenly moved. Then the soil arched up. The way it arched up was obviously a human figure. A moment later, this human figure climbed up with difficulty. It was none other than Count Dracula. At this time, he had already shrunk to his normal size. No, he was even smaller than a normal adult. He looked about the same height as an 11 or 12-year-old child. He was naked from head to toe. His pale skin was covered in blood and flesh. The bloody hole in his chest still hadn't healed. Half of his face had also completely disappeared. His throat could be clearly seen from the outside of his face. But even so, he kept shaking his head and said with difficulty, "Impossible! How could we, the noble blood clan, be destroyed by a lowly human? Impossible! Absolutely impossible!" When Emma saw this, her body trembled. "This is Arthur, my child." Her eyes were filled with disbelief. His own child was actually Count Dracula. How was this possible? Didn't Count Dracula live for hundreds or even thousands of years? His child was only 11 years old now. How could he be Count Dracula? Emma Sure, on the other hand, had known from Emma's sister's memories that Emma's child was Count Dracula. In fact, Count Dracula was not a person's name, but a title. It was a title passed down by the blood race. The blood race seemed to be immortal, but in fact, they would slowly age. Therefore, every 100 years, Count Dracula would choose the most talented member of the blood clan to inherit the title of Count Dracula. But this was only known to a very small number of high-ranking blood race members. As for where the Counts Dracula went after they stepped down, no one knew. Back then, Emma's sister brought her son, Arthur, to Count Dracula in order to take revenge on her. She turned him into a blood race member. In the end, Count Dracula inadvertently discovered that he had an extremely strong blood race talent. So, he passed on all of Count Dracula's inheritance to him, including his strength, which in a short 5 years, far exceeded the level of a level 10 super mutant blood race. And this Arthur, when he first came here, was only a 6-year-old child. Faced with the dark surroundings, where there were vampires everywhere, his mentality was greatly distorted. This created the Count Dracula that everyone feared now. Of course, no matter how strong Count Dracula was, he couldn't have withstood the blood palm of the giant blood Buddha just now. The only reason he was still alive now was because Emo Sure had held back. He was afraid that this palm would destroy the castle cellar, and he wouldn't be able to find the entrance to the dragon's lair. That would have to be found from Count Dracula's memories. At this moment, Emo Sure's wings vibrated slightly, and he brought Emma down into the blood-red palm print on the ground. After Emma landed, she hurriedly ran towards Arthur. "Arthur, Arthur. I'm Mother." "Arthur, do you still remember Mother?" Very quickly, she hugged Arthur, who had holes in his chest and face. "Child, are you okay?" "I'm Mother, I'm Mother. Mother is here." "It's okay. Mother will never leave you again." However, Arthur's eyes were dull. It was as if he couldn't remember anything at all. Just now, Emo Sure had used his draconic will to investigate this Arthur. After his draconic will had advanced to level 3, he could already detect the emotions of other living beings. When he found that Arthur's heart was filled with indignation and anger, he didn't hesitate to use memory plunder on him. Arthur's strength had been forcefully raised. Although his body's strength had increased, the strength of his brain cells couldn't keep up with the strength of his body. Therefore, after Emo Sure stole his memory, he became an idiot. At the same time, because the blood palm had a strong restraining effect on infected bodies, most of the blood breed virus in his body had been killed. Although the remaining bit of blood breed virus could ensure that he wouldn't die even with the holes in his chest and face. But that was it. At this moment, he had already become an ordinary idiot. Psychokinesis and corpse hunter aside, even an ordinary person could easily finish him off with a crowbar. He was no longer a threat to anyone. Emo Sure didn't pay any more attention to the mother and son. He turned and walked in the direction of the giant palm print. With a move of his draconic will, the stones and soil on the ruins flew up and fell to the sides. Very quickly, he used his draconic will to dig a hole about 2 meters deep. In the hole, a stone door appeared. It was a circular stone door. There was a carving on the stone door. It was a blood breed mother, holding a baby. Emo Sure knew from the memories of a few high-ranking blood breeds that in order to open this stone door, only the blood of the current Count Dracula's birth mother would be able to do so. Otherwise, if it was forcefully opened, it would detonate the explosives inside, causing the entire passage to be completely sealed. This was the real reason Emo Sure brought Emma to Castle Dracula. Chapter 189. Emo sure used his dragon will to dig the stone door. He turned around and said to Emma, "I need a drop of blood." Emma was hugging her silly son with tears flowing down her face. Hearing Emo sure's words, she naturally knew that Emo sure wanted her blood. She immediately nodded, took her son's hand, and came to the stone door. Emo sure's dragon will moved, and a small wound appeared on Emma's fingertip. A drop of blood dripped onto the stone door. The next moment, the blood seeped into the stone door. Then, the stone door trembled slightly. Accompanied by the sound of machinery, the stone door slowly moved to the sides. A deep and dark passage appeared in front of them. Emo sure's dragon will probed into the dark cave. However, there were many bends in this cave. No matter how strong his dragon will was, it was impossible for him to go around so many bends and probe inside. He gently stroked the blood slave on his shoulder. Dragon will ordered, "Go." The blood slave seemed to understand human nature and nodded. Then, it flapped its wings and flew into the passage. Emo sure used his dragon will to detect that there were a few vampires trying to escape more than 80 kilometers away. Although the bloody handprint just now destroyed most of the nearby vampires. But the vampires who were further away barely survived. But they were unlucky to be swept by Emo sure's dragon will at this moment. Soon, the bodies of these vampires were torn into pieces. Then, they reorganized and finally formed a virus clone that looked exactly like Emo sure. Emo sure's dragon will moved. The virus clone ran towards the bloody handprint. A moment later, the virus clone arrived at the entrance and directly entered the passage. With Emo sure's cautious personality, even if the blood slave had investigated clearly, he would still condense a virus clone and make another trip. Emma was slightly taken aback when she saw this person who looked exactly like Emo sure. Could it be that this Asian man was also a twin? While the blood slave was investigating, Emo sure directly signed in his mind. System, special event sign in. He was filled with anticipation. This time, they had destroyed Castle Dracula and killed almost all the higher-ups of the vampires. He should be able to get something good from signing in. The system quickly responded. Sign in successful. Sign in event, destroy the vampire's lair, kill Count Dracula. Sign in reward, 1 drop of Dracula's blood, 1 Dracula's voyage diary, vampire summon. Although Emo sure did not really kill Dracula, Dracula was still alive. However, the system had already determined that he had killed Count Dracula by wiping out the entire nest of the Blood Clan and cutting off Count Dracula's lineage. Emo sure carefully examined the 3 rewards in his mind. Dracula's blood. Any blood breed that absorbs it will rapidly grow to the level of Count Dracula. It is completely under the command of the host. Emo sure pondered for a moment. Dracula's blood was very useful to him at this stage. Dracula's voyage diary. The 3rd Count Dracula was passionate about ocean exploration. His diary recorded many secrets in the depths of the sea. Emo sure's mind flickered as he took out the nautical diary. The diary looked very old, and many of the corners of the book had been rolled up. Emo sure casually flipped through a few pages. His heart couldn't help but jump when he flipped through it. On the last few pages of the diary, there were 2 maps. Although the map was a little sloppy, it could still be seen clearly. Although Emo sure wasn't very good at geography in his previous life, he couldn't tell where these 2 pictures were. But in the center of these 2 pictures, there was a picture of an animal. The drawing was very ugly, but it could still be recognized that these 2 pictures were of dragons. Emo sure instantly thought, could there have been a dragon's lair at the bottom of the sea? Did the 3rd Count Dracula discover that lair? He should be able to find the answer in this nautical diary. However, he still had things to do at this time, so he would keep this diary for later study. Then, he looked at the last reward. Vampire summon. Use Dracula's blood to summon blood creatures. The type, number, and level of the summoned blood creatures are random. The summoned blood creatures will attack any creature with blood in their body, including the summoner. Use with caution. When Emo sure saw this skill, he was secretly happy. Previously, when he summoned zombies and mutant beasts, he needed to have the corresponding zombies and mutant beasts within a certain range. If there wasn't, he couldn't summon them. Moreover, the zombies and mutant beasts summoned were weaker than Emo sure. So those 2 skills seemed to be of little use. But this vampire summon didn't have this restriction. As long as he had Dracula's blood, He could summon blood creatures. And the type, number, and level of the summoned blood creatures were random. This was interesting. As for the summoned creatures attacking him, Mo sure wasn't worried. With so many trump cards, why would he be afraid of these blood creatures? If it really didn't work out, he could just go straight into the dragon's lair and do whatever he wanted outside. At the same time, Mo sure also received a message from the skill description given by the system. Blood Realm? What's that? Mo sure asked in his mind. The system was silent. Well, it seemed that he would have to slowly explore it in the future. While Mo sure was thinking, the blood slave had already investigated the entire lair in the tunnel. In the huge dragon's lair below, there was nothing except for 2 dried corpses and a dried horse corpse. Mo sure secretly thought. It seemed that the legend was true. In the legend, there was a horse wrangler who lost a horse. He went into the mountains and never came back. Another time, a young man fell into a cave in the mountains. He slid down the cave into a huge dragon's lair. It seemed that these were their corpses. Mo sure didn't immediately go in, waiting for the virus clone to go through the minefield. It wouldn't be too late to go in after he was 100% safe. At this time, he turned around and looked at Emma. He saw that ever since Emma saw her son, Arthur, she had been hugging him, as if she was afraid that she would lose her son if they separated. As for her son who became an idiot, he didn't respond to her calls. At first, she naturally couldn't accept it. But she quickly thought it through. Instead of letting her son become Count Dracula and suck human blood, it would be better to let her become like this. She would peacefully stay by her side. She naturally knew that her son became like this because of Mo sure. Along the way, she had already seen this situation several times. Whether it was a vampire or a zombie, as long as Mo sure looked at him, he would most likely become an idiot. But she didn't hate Mo sure. She guessed that if this Eastern man didn't turn her son into this, then her son would most likely still want to kill them, and would still be that terrifying Count Dracula. So not only did she not hate Mo sure, but she also thanked Mo sure. She thanked Mo sure for sparing her son's life in the end. There was a kind of person in the world who always thought of others with the greatest kindness. In fact, her thoughts weren't bad. It's just that Mo sure didn't explain it to her. With Mo sure's personality, he was too lazy to explain so much. What you think is your business, what I do is my business. Not convinced? Kill me if you have the ability. Chapter 190. Mo sure wasn't worried about what Emma thought of him in her heart. But he suddenly remembered that Emma was a level 10 psychokinesis. If he gave her that drop of Dracula's blood, she would grow into the next Count Dracula. With Count Dracula's strength and level 10 psychokinesis, she would be the strongest existence on Earth apart from himself. With such a subordinate, he would save a lot of trouble. Thinking of this, he turned to Emma and said, I have a way to let you become as strong as other blood breeds without sucking human blood, and live a normal life like them. Are you willing to try it? Hearing Mo sure's words, Emma looked at her son. After a moment, she nodded heavily. Yes. Now that she was a blood breed, she definitely couldn't stay in the human base. And because she insisted on not sucking human blood, her body was extremely weak now. She and her son would not be able to survive in the wilderness where infected creatures ran rampant. Now that there was a chance to become stronger without sucking human blood, she naturally had to seize it. Hearing this, Mo sure took out a finger-sized white glass bottle with a thought. There was a drop of blood-red liquid in the bottle. Mo sure said, Give me your hand. Emma hesitated for a moment, then extended her right hand. Mo sure opened the bottle cap and poured the drop of blood into her palm. The drop of blood seemed to be alive as it rolled around in her palm a few times. Finally, it merged into her palm. At the same time, Mo sure's dragon's will probed her body. After the drop of blood entered Emma's body, it quickly infected all the cells in her body as if it was contagious. After her cells were infected by the virus in the drop of blood, they rapidly mutated. Generally speaking, there were 2 types of mutations. One was getting worse and worse. The other was becoming stronger and stronger. Emma was obviously the latter. Her cells were getting stronger and stronger. The toughness of her blood vessels was also getting stronger and stronger. In a short 5 minutes, she completed the mutation. At this moment, her physical strength, speed, and other aspects were exactly the same as the previous counts of Dracula. They were dozens of times stronger than ordinary level 10 blood breeds. Coupled with her level 10 telekinesis, she was probably 100 times stronger than the average level 10 mutated blood breeds. Such strength was enough to make him the strongest existence among all the previous counts of Dracula. At the same time, when she looked at Mo Sure, her gaze was filled with absolute reverence. It was the kind of reverence that was 100% obedient to Mo Sure. At the same time, her desire for human blood was greatly reduced. When Mo Sure had plundered her son Arthur's memories, he had already reached the level of Count Dracula. There was no need for him to suck human blood. The blood of other animals can also be substituted. It was just that to them. Human blood was more delicious than the blood of other animals. Mo Sure took out another bottle of recovery medicine and threw it to her. Give it to him. This time, Emma didn't hesitate and fed her son the medicine. A few minutes later, a miracle happened. The bloody holes on his son's chest and face were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just 5 minutes, his body had completely recovered. Seeing this, Emma's eyes were filled with tears. She repeatedly said to Mo Sure, thank you, master, thank you, master." Mo Sure shook his head. He ordered her, spend some time with your son today. From tomorrow onwards, you will conquer the remaining 8 blood breeds families. Then, bring these families to destroy all the mother nests in the world and eliminate all the zombies. Emma respectfully lowered her head and said, yes, master. She didn't know why she would obey such an order. It was as if she had done it for no reason. And she felt that it was only right to obey Mo Sure's orders. At this time, Mo Sure's virus clone had finished exploring the inside. There didn't seem to be any danger inside. Mo Sure then slowly walked inside. Emma took the initiative to stay outside. She helped Mo Sure keep watch. She hugged her son and watched as Mo Sure's figure gradually disappeared into the dark and deep passage. Her heart was filled with gratitude. She muttered, son, we have to be grateful to Master for the rest of our lives. If it weren't for Mo Sure, she would still be in the Manhattan base, tortured by the desire for blood every day. If it weren't for Mo Sure, she probably wouldn't be able to see her son again in this lifetime. Even if she did see her son, he would only be a bloodthirsty demon. But now, Mo Sure not only rescued her from the Manhattan base, but also allowed her to see her son. He also allowed her strength to greatly increase in a short period of time. He gave her and her son the ability to survive in the wilderness. And he also restored her son's body. She had never been willing to judge others with malice in her life. Moreover, Mo Sure had helped her and her son so much. She was naturally only grateful to Mo Sure. As for being deprived of part of her freedom, she had never thought about it. In her opinion, in order to repay Mo Sure's kindness, she should do anything for Mo Sure. At this time, Mo Sure had already followed the passage and turned many times. Finally, he came to a huge and empty cave. In a corner of the cave, there were 2 mummified corpses and a mummified horse corpse. Other than that, there was nothing else. This should be the former draconic ruins. However, there were no dragon skeletons in this draconic ruins, nor were there any claw marks left by a giant dragon. Mo Sure's dragons will thoroughly check this place 3 times. Only then did he say, "System, sign in." The system's voice suddenly sounded frowny face, sign in successful. Sign in location, Draconic Ruins. Sign in reward. 1. Demon Suppressing Orb. Sign in reward. 2. Dragon Scale. Sign in reward. 3. Dragon's Will. Mo Sure looked through these 3 rewards carefully. He had an understanding in his heart. Among them, the one that excited him the most was the Dragon's Will. Originally, the improvement of Dragon's Will was extremely difficult. Especially after advancing to level 3 this time, he could clearly feel that his Dragon's Will was much stronger than before. Originally, with his Dragon's Will that had just advanced to level 3, he didn't know how long it would take for it to level up again. But this time, a wisp of Dragon's Will had increased his total Dragon's Will by a large margin on the basis of level 3. He estimated that with 2 more wisps of Dragon's Will, his Dragon's Will would be able to level up again. As for the Dragon Scale, the effect was exactly the same as the previous one. Mo Sure didn't know why the system rewarded him with so many Dragon Scales. The Demon Suppressing Orb was a bead the size of a walnut. It was nurtured in the body of a giant dragon and had a righteous aura. A single bead could suppress 10,000 demons. However, this demon-suppressing orb was a one-time consumable. If he wanted to obtain it again after using it up, he could only use his evolution points to designate a reward to sign in. Just as Mo Shi was secretly rejoicing in his heart, suddenly on the stone wall next to him, the sound of a mechanism could be heard. Ka ka ka. A stone door had actually appeared on the seemingly intact stone wall. Then, ka ka ka, ka ka ka, one after another, the sound of a mechanism could be heard. On the stone wall, stone doors appeared one after another. The stone doors weren't big, only the size of a room's door. From each stone door, a figure walked out. Chapter 191. 5 figures walked out of the 5 stone doors. The 5 figures were pale, and their eyes were bloodshot. In the dark tunnel, Mo Shi could not see their faces clearly even with his eyesight. In this dark and lonely environment, the 5 figures gave off a strong sense of oppression just by standing there. Mo Shi scanned them with his blood dragon's eye, and their abilities were immediately displayed. Species, blood breed. Level 10 supermutated. The 5 of them were all level 10 supermutated. At this moment, one of the black figures spoke slowly. Lowly human, how dare you trespass into the sacred land of the blood breed? This is unforgivable, another black figure spoke slowly, and his voice sounded like metal plates rubbing against each other. What a powerful human. I'm at the critical stage of my breakthrough. Sucking his blood will definitely be beneficial to my breakthrough. The other 3 black figures spoke one after another. You must have killed many members of the blood breed to be able to make it here. Since that's the case, stay here. This is the territory of the blood breed. Lowly human, no matter how powerful you are, you won't be able to escape death today. As they spoke, their black cloaks fluttered even though there was no wind. The 5 of them seemed to have grown much taller in an extremely short period of time. Soon, the 5 of them had filled up 1/5 of the entire cave. Moreover, they were still expanding. Mo Shi shook his head slowly. From Arthur's memories, he already knew that there were people in this cave. After the successive Counts Dracula left their positions, they had all hidden in the so-called sacred land of the blood breed and trained hard in order to break through their limits and reach the next realm. This was because in the ancient legends, their lifespan would only increase when they broke through to the next realm. Even if each generation was 100 years old, the oldest of the 5 old fellows was an old monster who had lived for more than 500 years. Every single one of them was stronger than Arthur from before. Each of them even had their own unique skills. However, after Mo Shi checked their abilities, he directly ignored them. No matter how strong the 5 of them were, they were still too weak compared to him. And this time, he didn't even bother to lift a finger. The dragon thought stirred and directly took out that demon-suppressing orb. This demon-suppressing orb was only the size of a walnut and looked like a glass ball. However, there seemed to be something indescribable contained within this glass ball. When he took out the demon-suppressing orb, he did not need to activate it with dragon will, nor did he need to activate it with energy. It just sat there quietly in the palm of his hand. The 5 huge shadows in the surroundings immediately let out heart-wrenching screams. Ah! At the same time, the black shadow kept twisting and struggling. It was shrinking rapidly. In the end, the 5 shadows turned into 5 pools of blood. At the same time, the things inside the demon-suppressing orb were exhausted and turned into a pile of powder. Mo Shi used his draconic will to carefully sense the process of the demon-suppressing orb killing the 5 experts. There was no earth-shattering momentum, nor was there any glaring light. Just like that, the 5 experts were killed. It was just this simple and unadorned. From a microscopic point of view, this demon-suppressing orb actually emitted a kind of microwave that couldn't be seen or felt by the naked eye. When this microwave came into contact with the 5 experts, it directly destroyed the virus chromosomes in their bodies and caused a photochemical reaction, killing the virus in their bodies. The principle was similar to ultraviolet disinfection. However, the microwave emitted by this demon-suppressing orb was many times stronger than ultraviolet light. It could easily kill the virus in the 5 experts' bodies. The 5 blood breed experts were almost all infected with the blood breed virus. Now that the virus in their bodies had been killed, they naturally couldn't live. Therefore, from this perspective, the stronger the infected creature the demon-suppressing orb encountered, the better the effect. Moreover, the demon-suppressing orb ignored levels. Even if an enemy who was thousands of times stronger than Mo Sure stood in front of him, as long as he was infected, he could still silently kill him. Most importantly, such a domineering demon-suppressing orb had no restrictions. With this orb in hand, the world was mine. Although Mo Sure had obtained a few items or skills that ignored levels before, they were all used for defense or had very strong restrictions. They either required energy or had a short usage time. Or the stronger the opponent, the worse the effect. Only this demon-suppressing orb was the only one without any restrictions. It truly ignored levels. At this moment, after killing the 5 guys, Mo Sure looked at his evolution points again. He happily found that his evolution points had exceeded 10 billion. At the same time, a system notification appeared in his mind. Frowny face evolution points have exceeded 10 billion. You can upgrade. Do you wish to upgrade now? Mo Sure replied in his mind. Upgrade now. This upgrade will take 12 hours. You cannot sign in during the upgrade. Mo Sure was already familiar with this. He was overjoyed. This trip to Castle Dracula was definitely a rewarding one. Dragon Thoughts leveled up, obtained a powerful subordinate, obtained a lot of rewards, and now the system was about to upgrade. Turning around and leaving the dragon's nest, Mo Sure was in a good mood. His dragon thoughts moved. In the next moment, boom 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 boom, a total of 100 meteorites smashed into the mountain behind him. Flames soared into the sky, smoke and dust filled the air. Amidst the deafening explosion, the undulating mountain range within a radius of tens of kilometers collapsed with a loud rumble. After a long time, when the flames disappeared, the smoke and dust dispersed. Looking at the mountain again, there was no sign of the mountain. Within a radius of tens of kilometers, it had been razed to the ground. This was the terrifying destructive power of Mo Sure's dragon thoughts after leveling up to level 3. Arthur was so scared that he curled up in his mother's arms, his body trembling. Emma hugged her son tightly. Looking at the ruins of the mountain, the shock in her heart was more intense than ever before. Although after Mo Sure's appearance, she was already shocked to the point of numbness. But this time, she was still shocked to the point of speechlessness. A person's psychic power could reach such a terrifying level? This was too strong. She had always thought that her master should be a psychic master. And it was very likely that he was a top-level 10 psychic master. But now it seemed that she still underestimated her master's strength. This was probably far beyond the realm of a level 10 psychic master. Her level 10 psychokinesis was already considered an absolute powerhouse. But compared to her master, it was like a firefly compared to the sun. She was nothing at all. Mo Sure took one last look at Emma and said, "Let's start working tomorrow." After saying that, his figure moved. His figure disappeared instantly. Only 100-meter-tall giant dragon shadow was left in place. Emma looked at the huge dragon projection and came to a realization. Her master's strength was heaven-defying, and all kinds of methods were beyond her understanding. It seemed that as long as she followed her master in the future, her silly son might recover one day. Chapter 192. The world was very big. There were a lot of zombies. More than 7 billion zombies. In addition to birds, there were 200 to 400 billion. There were estimated to be 1 trillion mammals. With so many infected creatures, for Mo Sure, it was like a huge treasure trove of evolution points. However, with so many infected creatures, if Mo Sure wanted to kill them all by himself, he would probably be exhausted to death. Therefore, he had already begun to train his subordinates. Let these subordinates kill those infected creatures. According to the system's judgment, the evolution points obtained by his subordinates from killing infected creatures would also be counted on his head. Therefore, Mo Sure only needed to train a large number of subordinates. Let them kill infected creatures. Then he could peacefully stay in the base. Wouldn't it be wonderful to watch the evolution points enter his account every day? This Emma was the first subordinate he had recruited. At around 10 o'clock that night, a system prompt appeared in his mind. Frowny face system upgrade successful. Upgrade reward, 1, a herd of cattle, 10. Upgrade reward, 2, a herd of goats, 10. Upgrade reward, 3, a herd of birds, 100, random type. upgrade reward. 4. A herd of animals, 100, random type. Mo sure looked at these rewards. Not only was he not unhappy, but he was also a little excited. He had thought many times before. Except for a small number of animals in the base, all the other animals in the world were infected. After those infected animals were cleaned up, what would happen to the entire ecological chain? Without animals, the ecological chain would not be able to function. The humans on Earth would still only end up being destroyed. And now, these rewards from the system's upgrade were absolutely timely. With these animals, when he signed in other animals in the future, he could build a miniature ecosystem around the C1 base. When the number of these animals slowly increased, this ecosystem could expand to the entire Wuxia and even the whole world. Moreover, when he carefully looked at these rewards, he was delighted to find that these animals obtained from the system were absolutely immune to harmful viruses. This was amazing. Even if other infected creatures bit these animals, they would definitely not be infected. Then the system's voice continued. Frowny face upgrade content. The number of sign-in rewards has increased. A maximum of 10,000 of the same items can be obtained each time. This time, there was only one upgrade content. But just this one item made Mo sure excited. Every time he signed in, he would receive 10,000 of the same items. With the addition of the Dragon Palace, he could obtain 20,000 pieces. In that case, wouldn't he be able to level up again in just a few days? Furthermore, after leveling up, it would only take a month at most before it could level up again. In other words, it would take him 40 days to become a level 10 Great Hunter. Just thinking about it made him a little excited. Naturally, the more rewards there were, the more evolution points he would need. If he chose 10,000 rewards each time, he would need 11 million evolution points. However, this was not a problem for the current Mo sure. He already had more than 10 billion evolution points. Now that he had so many subordinates helping him earn evolution points, he could earn around 10 million evolution points every day. Would he be afraid of not having enough evolution points? Mo sure did not return to base C1 immediately. Since they were out, they might as well take a look at the other bases. Therefore, in the next few days, he went to every base in the world. With his dragon's will, he did not even need to enter the base. As long as he was tens of kilometers away from the base, he could activate psychokinesis. In every base in the world, he left 10 psychokinesis. With his level 3 dragon's will, he could activate psychokinesis 10 times a day. Each time he could activate 10 psychokinesis. Moreover, he could directly increase their telekinesis to level 10. Apart from Wuxia, there were only 30 bases left in the world. He spent 3 days and left 300 level 10 psychokinesis. He ordered them to go to every corner of the world to kill zombies and infected creatures. In that way, the Bloodbreeds had Emma as their commander. The zombies were killed by these 300 level 10 psychokinesis. Mo sure could return to base C1 and peacefully enjoy his life. As for the dragon's nest in the sea that was recorded on the map in Dracula's voyage diary, Mo sure planned to wait until his sea dragon avatar was at least level 10 super mutated before exploring. 3 days later, Mo sure finally returned to Wuxia. He once again created 10 virus doppelgangers and had them clean up all the infected creatures in Wuxia except for Emperor Qin's mausoleum. With Mo sure's current strength, the virus doppelganger he created was already a level 4 Great Hunter and a level 1 Psychic Master. He was definitely one of the top existences on Earth. Of course, he also wanted to create a virus doppelganger with Dragon's Will. However, not everyone could withstand Dragon's Will. He estimated that when he reached level 5 Long Nian Sure, the virus doppelganger he created should be able to withstand Dragon's Will. Mo sure and Happy had not seen each other for 5 days. Happy was naturally very happy to see Mo sure return. When Mo sure saw that Happy was happy, he was naturally very happy too. For the next 3 days, Mo sure didn't ask anything, nor did he care about anything. He just drank tea, chatted, and watered the flowers with Happy. It was very peaceful. As for the work at the corpse farm, Happy was still conscientious. The leaders of the corpse farm, including the base's chief, had persuaded her many times to stop. After all, she was Mo sure's girlfriend. How could they let her do this kind of work? However, Happy did not agree. She felt that it was the apocalypse now, and the base could not afford to keep idle people. She could not be the only idle person. Besides, she did not know any other skills. She was very familiar with the work of raising corpses. Most importantly, the first time she met Brother Mo was at the corpse farm. She still remembered how Brother Mo patiently taught her how to raise corpses. Therefore, every time she raised corpses, her heart would always be filled with happiness. After dinner, Mo Sure and Happy took a walk along the tree-lined path. Happy held Mo Sure's arm. When they met other people along the way, although she was a little shy, her eyes were filled with happiness. Mo Sure could not help but tease her. "Don't call it Happy. Call it Happy." Happy nodded and gestured with her hands. "Whatever Brother Mo says." Mo Sure had nothing to do, so he used the blood dragon's eye to look at Happy. He found that her level was still a question mark. It seemed that the time for the last question mark to be unlocked was longer than the previous two. 3 days later, Mo Sure and Happy went to the base chief's office while taking a walk. They understood the current situation of the base. In the base, the first level, 7 Hunter had already appeared. The number of people above the level of Corpse Hunter had reached more than 33,000. There were also more than 500 people in psychokinesis. Mo Sure used another day to activate 100 level 10 psychokinesis. In this way, as long as he stayed in the base for a while, base C1 would become the strongest base in the world. There was no other. The strength of the base has increased, and the infected creatures outside have also been cleaned up. Mo Sure then placed the animals he obtained from signing in around the base. He reminded the base chief not to hunt these animals first. They could only be hunted after the ecosphere around the base was almost formed. The people in the base were naturally very surprised that Mo Sure could get so many uninfected animals. But that was all. Mo Sure had displayed too many abilities. They were already shocked to the point of numbness. It was not strange for anything to happen to Mo Sure. It was not until all of this was done that Mo Sure's consciousness once again entered the sea dragon clone's body. Chapter 193. Mo Sure finished arranging everything. That night, his consciousness finally entered the body of the sea dragon doppelganger again. He was now the most powerful being in the world. But he felt that it wasn't enough. He always vaguely felt that there was some kind of restriction on Earth. The limit of infected creatures was level 10 super mutant. And the limit of humans was level 10 great hunters. He would definitely encounter such a restriction when he became a level 10 great hunter in the future. If this restriction couldn't be broken in a short time, it would take him 7 years to break through, just like the level 10 hunters at the beginning. That was really too long. And the sea dragon clone could at most be 1 level higher than him. So it was very necessary for him to quickly raise the level of the sea dragon clone. At this moment, with a thought, the strength of the sea dragon clone appeared in his mind. Species, sea dragon. Level 5 strong mutant. Ability, evolution by devouring, dragon telekinesis attack. He hadn't seen this guy for 8 days, but this guy had only leveled up once. Mo Sure shook his head. It was a bit slow. It seemed that he had to level up as soon as possible, then leave the Yellow River Basin and go to the sea. After all, there were endless possibilities in the sea. And in the sea, there was a dragon ruins waiting for him to explore. Mo Sure scanned with his dragon telekinesis and detected that on the shore 5 kilometers downstream, there was a strong mutant tiger more than 5 meters long squatting at the entrance of a cave on the shore, ambushing a mutant wolf. Mo Sure immediately swam downstream. With the speed of the sea dragon clone, he could now swim 5 meters per second. Although this speed wasn't as fast as a human running at full speed, don't forget that this was in the water. And with the speed of the river, he could swim 7 or 8 meters per second downstream. Soon, Mo Sure controlled the sea dragon clone and came to the shore. Probing with his dragon telekinesis, he could easily detect that the strong mutant tiger seemed to be napping. He opened the blood dragon's eye and checked its level. Species, mutant tiger. Level 6 strong mutant. Mo Sure quietly dived out of the river. Then he swam diagonally to the surface of the water. At a certain moment, splash! With a huge splash, the 15-meter-long sea dragon clone instantly rushed out of the water. The mutant tiger suddenly turned its head. He subconsciously wanted to escape from the shore. However, at this moment, Mo Sure's dragon will spread out. Dragon will attack. Although the Sea Dragon clone's Dragon Psyche attack wasn't as ferocious and domineering as Mo Shi's level 3 Dragon Psyche, it still stunned the ferocious tiger. While he was distracted, the Sea Dragon's clone bit down. Crack! It actually bit off that huge tiger head in one bite. Then, its body kept rolling and swaying, dragging the mutated tiger's body into the water. After eating heartily, a crackling sound quickly came from his body. His body length was rapidly increasing. Finally, it stopped at 16 meters. Species: Mosasaurus. Level 6 strong mutation ability. Evolution by devouring. Dragon Psychic attack. Mo Shi's moves were indeed extraordinary. In just half an hour, the Sea Dragon clone had leveled up. In fact, with the strength of the Sea Dragon clone and the Dragon Will attack, it was not difficult to deal with some strong mutant beasts below level 10. However, after the Sea Dragon lost Mo Shi's control, its self-awareness wasn't human after all. Even with a powerful ability like the Dragon Psychic attack, it was difficult to exert its full power. It wouldn't turn around and run away if it encountered something 1 or 2 levels higher than it. However, it would be very difficult to kill it. That was why it had only leveled up once after Mo Shi left for so many days. At this moment, Mo Shi was already extremely proficient in using the Dragon Will. As long as it was a strong mutant beast below level 10, he could easily kill it. That night, Mo Shi controlled the Sea Dragon clone and killed 3 strong mutant beasts in a row. The Sea Dragon clone's level was directly raised to level 8. It wasn't until dawn that Mo Shi's consciousness returned to his body. Although the Sea Dragon clone had leveled up twice in a row, it was still very tiring for him. And it had only leveled up twice, so he was still a little dissatisfied. At this rate, it was still unknown whether he could reach level 10 tonight. No, he couldn't go on like this. At this rate, when would he be able to reach a level higher than himself? He had to think of a way. That night after he had rested, Mo Shi didn't directly transfer his consciousness into the Sea Dragon clone. Instead, he set off and ran in the direction of the Yellow River. When he arrived near the Yellow River, the blood dragon wings grew out of his back. The wings flapped slightly, and he flew downstream from above the Yellow River. At the same time, the Dragon Psychic attack swept over and took in all the mutant creatures in the Yellow River. Soon, he discovered several strong mutant beasts between level 8 and level 10. Mo Shi's Dragon Psychic attack moved, intending to knock out a level 8 mutant beast. However, the Dragon Psychic attack had just leveled up to level 3, so he wasn't very familiar with the strength of the Dragon Psychic attack. He had accidentally killed the level 8 mutant beast with a shockwave. Mo Shi was a little embarrassed. He could only reduce his strength and continue to shock the other strong mutant beasts with the Dragon Psychic attack. All the strong mutant beasts were knocked out. Then he led them with the Dragon Psychic attack and quickly swam toward the Sea Dragon clone. More than 2 hours later, all the strong mutant beasts between level 8 and level 10 were delivered to the Sea Dragon clone. And each of the strong mutant beasts only fainted. None of them died. At this time, without Mo Shi's control, the Sea Dragon clone was still hissing excitedly. It pounced on these strong mutant beasts. Only half an hour later, it had devoured more than a dozen level 8 mutant beasts and a level 9 mutant beast, and finally advanced to level 9. Mo Shi nodded slightly. At the same time, he secretly cursed himself for not realizing this before. The system only said that if the Sea Dragon clone wanted to advance, it had to eat live mutant beasts. There was no restriction on whether the Sea Dragon clone caught the mutant beasts itself. He had gone into a dead end at that time. Now, he could easily control these strong mutant beasts with his main body and let the Sea Dragon clone devour them. Wouldn't this save a lot of trouble and increase his strength much faster? Soon, after the Sea Dragon clone devoured these mutant beasts, its strength had increased to level 10. As long as it advanced by one more level, it would be promoted to a super mutant beast. Some people would say that this way, it would level up too quickly. Without combat experience, its combat strength would still be trash, and it would be like pulling up seedlings to help them grow. Mo Shi believed that if he could crush his opponent with his level, why would he need combat experience? It was like an adult fighting with a 3-year-old child. With a slap, the child would cry home to his mother. Why would he need combat experience? So most of the time, level suppression was the way to go. Chapter 194. Mo sure felt gratified to see the sea dragon clone reach level 10. It was like seeing his son finally enter the 6th grade. However, just the 6th grade wasn't enough. There were still middle school, high school, and college, so he had to continue to level up. Mo sure continued to search the Yellow River Basin. In the end, he found the only dozen or so level 1 mutated beasts in the Yellow River Basin. It was still the dragon consciousness that knocked them out and left them for the sea dragon clone to devour. The sea dragon clone's first choice was a mutant crocodile. This mutant crocodile was much bigger than the ones Mo sure had encountered in the dam. It was more than 20 meters long and 2 to 3 meters tall. Its body was covered with a thick layer of scales that reflected a metallic luster. It had a huge mouth more than 5 meters long, and the sharp teeth inside were uneven, shining with a cold light. A timid person would probably pee their pants just by looking at it. Mo sure originally thought that if the sea dragon's teeth couldn't break through the mutant crocodile's defense, he would have to help it. It was really troublesome. But he didn't expect the sea dragon to be so smart. It used 2 barbed fins to break open the mutant crocodile's long palate and ate directly from its mouth. A moment later, the mutant crocodile was eaten until only an empty shell was left. At the same time, the dull sound of bones growing came from its body. Crack, crack, crack. Its body was growing rapidly. Hard horny scales also began to grow on the surface of its body. They looked exactly the same as the crocodile's scales. Its fins became thicker and thicker, and it already looked like a crocodile. Its mouth also became longer, closer to the appearance of a crocodile's long palate. It became more conducive to biting. A moment later, its body had reached 20 meters in length. 4 branches grew on its body. At first glance, it looked like a mutant crocodile. But if one looked carefully, they would find that its face was even more ferocious than a crocodile. On the top of its head, there were hard barbs the length of a finger. Its tail was about 7 or 8 meters long. And this tail was very strange. It was actually triangular. Hard scales grew on each of its horns, making it look like a 3-edged blade. From the neck to the tip of the tail, there was a serrated blade. On the whole, it looked more aggressive and had a stronger defense. At a certain moment, a thought flashed through Mo sure's mind. Didn't this guy look a bit like an earth dragon? In Western legends, dragons were divided into many types. Among them, according to how they traveled, there were flying dragons and earth dragons. The earth dragon's strength and status were much lower than the flying dragons. Some people even thought that the earth dragon could only be considered a subdragon species and not a true dragon. However, Mo sure felt that no matter how low the earth dragon's status was, it was still related to the word dragon. If there really was an earth dragon, Mo sure felt that it should be this fellow. He used the blood dragon's eye to look again. Species, sea dragon. Level 1 supermutated, ability. Evolution by devouring, dragon psychic attack, death roll. It had finally reached supermutated dragon. Using this method to devour to evolve dragons, devour evolution. In the past, he didn't know what he was thinking, but he didn't think of this point. Next, it was time to head for the sea. Mo sure waited for the sea dragon doppelganger to finish devouring the remaining mutant beasts before controlling it to swim towards the estuary of the Yellow River. Its speed was now 20 meters per second. Even so, it still took them more than 3 hours to reach the estuary of the Yellow Sea. At this time, Mo sure had already caught hundreds of super-mutated beasts below level 3. After knocking out these super-mutated beasts, he stored them in his personal reservoir. Then, he let the sea dragon clone enter the personal reservoir and eat. This was safe and wouldn't be discovered by other creatures. Mo sure's consciousness returned to his body and he sighed. This was more tiring than raising a son. But it was worth it. When it grew up, it could go treasure hunting in the sea. And in the future, its strength could surpass his by a large realm. At that time, it would be his biggest trump card. While the sea dragon clone was eating in the personal reservoir, Mo sure returned to base C1 under the moonlight. The next morning, after breakfast, Mo sure's consciousness returned to the sea dragon clone. At this time, the sea dragon clone was 23 meters long. Overall, it was even more mighty and domineering. It was already a level 3 mutant beast. It was definitely the first time in the world that a level 1 super-mutated beast had risen 2 levels in one night. Even Mo sure took a few months to advance from a level 1 great hunter to a level 3 great hunter. Looking at the personal reservoir, it was empty except for the sea dragon clone. There were no other mutant beasts. Wuxia immediately ordered a virus clone to go to the Yellow Sea and capture dozens of level 4 and level 5 super mutated beasts to store in the personal reservoir. Now that he had familiarized himself with the level 3 dragon telepathy for the past few days, the virus clones he could condense were even stronger. Most of them were level 4 great hunters and level 3 psychic masters. With their strength, let alone level 4 and level 5 super mutated beasts. Even level 6 and level 7 super mutated beasts wouldn't be a problem. So Wuxia could relax for a few more days. But Wuxia didn't know that he wouldn't be able to relax for a few days. Antarctica, McMurdo Dry Valley, also known as Death Valley. When many people thought of Antarctica, the first thing that came to mind was a world of ice and snow. But McMurdo Dry Valley didn't have a trace of ice and snow. Because in this valley, the cold wind whistled all year round. The cold wind blew at a speed of more than 300 kilometers per hour, taking away all the moisture in the air. So it hadn't rained or snowed here for more than 2 million years. The entire valley was barren. There were only large and small stones. And between these stones, there were hundreds and thousands of sea beast skeletons. There were penguin skeletons, seal skeletons. So this place was called Death Valley. There were many strange things in the valley. Among them, there were 2 that were the most terrifying. First, this place was more than 50 kilometers away from the nearest coastline. Why would seals and other marine animals travel such a long distance and die here in groups? Second, and also the most terrifying thing, when you walked along the valley full of animal skeletons to the end, you would find a glacier. And on top of the snow-white glacier, there was a blood-red waterfall. This blood-red waterfall flowed down the glacier, all the way to the dry valley, and then it would dry up. Here, every once in a while, blood-red liquid would spurt out from the glacier. When it flowed into the dry valley, it would disappear. It was said that many exploratory teams had mysteriously disappeared after coming here. But at this time in the fierce wind, above the blood-red waterfall, 2 light blue lights slowly appeared. At first, it was just 2 balls of light the size of wash basins. A moment later, these 2 balls of light began to slowly condense into human silhouettes. Another 5 minutes later, the light completely condensed into 2 humans. Chapter 195. Death Valley. Above the blood-colored waterfall. Suddenly, 2 light blue orbs appeared. Gradually, the pale blue ball of light condensed into 2 humans. One of them was a bald middle-aged man, while the other was a young man with shoulder-length hair. The long-haired young man looked at his body from head to toe and said curiously, "Isn't this teleportation technology too awesome?" The bald middle-aged man smiled and explained, "Breaking down a human body into molecular form and teleporting it to a planet 30 light-years away. Then, reassembling the molecules and forming a human form again. This is called disassembling and reassembling teleportation." The long-haired young man joked, "You can reassemble after disassembling? Isn't this the same as resurrecting us after killing us once? Isn't it too awesome to resurrect the dead?" The bald middle-aged man explained patiently, "Young master, you must be joking. The technology of resurrecting the dead hasn't been developed yet. This disassembling and reassembling technology is just an improved version of the ancient micro-wormhole teleportation technology." The long-haired young man waved his hand and looked a little impatient. I know. There are very few large wormholes in space, but micro-wormholes that are invisible to the naked eye are everywhere. The micro-wormhole technology is a teleportation technology that breaks down an object into molecular form and transmits it to a designated coordinate through the micro-wormhole before reassembling the molecules. The long-haired young man recited it like a high school student reciting history and politics. The bald middle-aged man smiled and said, "Young master is indeed a top student." The long-haired young man waved his hand and looked even more impatient. "All right, let's go." As he said that, he snapped his fingers. The next moment, the shoes on his feet made a few clicks and buckles popped out. The 2 pairs of shoes joined together and continued to extend. Finally, they combined into something that looked like a skateboard. However, this skateboard didn't have wheels. Instead, 2 small wings popped out from both sides. Jet holes appeared under the shoes and at the back. The jet holes sprayed out a stream of light blue particles. Under the strong repulsive force, the young man quickly levitated. His eyes were immediately filled with excitement. He shouted loudly, "Woo woo! First hunting ground, your hunters have arrived." The bald middle-aged man behind him quickly reminded him loudly, "Young master, you came to the first hunting ground to become a level 10 great hunter. Therefore, try not to use these high-tech methods. You must maximize the potential of your body." Hearing this, the young man shook his head helplessly. "Oh well, it's been a long time since I walked." As he spoke, he snapped his fingers again. The hoverboard under his feet landed on the ground, and with a few clicks, it returned to the shape of a shoe. "Let's go." The youth leaped into the air. In the blink of an eye, he had traveled 340 meters. The bald middle-aged man smiled, lifted his feet, and followed him. It was obvious that he had a much easier time crossing the 340 meters than the young man. At the same time, he continued to exhort. "Young master, you're here for the sake of breaking through to become a level 10 great hunter. If it's not too dangerous, I won't help you." The long-haired young man shook his head impatiently. I know. According to the information I have, the strongest creature in the first hunting ground is only a level 10 mutated creature. As for the inferior humans in the first hunting ground, not a single great hunter or psychic master had appeared. What danger could there be? To put it bluntly, we are the most powerful beings here. My mother is too much. She actually let a level 5 psychic master like you protect me. How worried is she about me? The bald middle-aged man could only listen with an awkward smile. 2 days later, the sea dragon clone's strength had risen to a level 6 mutated beast. In another 2 days, when it rose to a level 8 mutated beast, Mo planned to personally control the sea dragon clone and enter the sea to crush a group of mutated sea beasts. However, on this day he suddenly had a thought. He had left a level 10 psychokinesis in the Chile base, and it was suddenly killed. Mo didn't pay much attention to it at first. After all, he had left a few hundred level 10 psychokinesis behind. The loss of 1 or 2 didn't affect him at all. He really couldn't be bothered to cross half the world for a level 10 psychokinesis. However, in the following day, he lost contact with 3 level 10 psychokinesis. Mo had to take this seriously. He ordered the remaining 7 psychokinesis in the Chile base to gather together. At the same time, they were to immediately report if they discovered anything. However, in the next 2 hours, 2 level 10 psychokinesis were killed. Mo slightly furrowed his brows. Although level 10 psychokinesis wasn't the strongest on Earth, it had no problem dealing with mutated creatures below level 5. Now that level 10 psychokinesis were dying one after another, there must be a creature far stronger than level 5 behind this. A level 10 psychokinesis reported to Mo from a distance. "Master, according to the information we have, it seems that something is hunting us." Another level 10 psychic reported, "That's right. When we went outside the base in the past 2 days, we found that all the mutated creatures below level 5 around the base were basically killed. And we just got in touch with another base nearby. In their base, a few level 10 hunters were also killed. We guess that this powerful murderer must be hunting all the powerful creatures regardless of species." Hearing this, Mo thought for a moment in his heart. He gave an order to Emma in his mind. "Emma, you're close to the Chile base. Go and see what's going on." Emma's voice quickly sounded in Mo's mind. "Yes, master." After doing this, Mo lay back on the recliner under the grape trellis in the yard. Looking up at the night sky, he yawned and closed his eyes. This was the benefit of having a powerful subordinate. Some problems could be solved by this subordinate. He didn't have to do everything himself. The next morning, after Mo woke up, he checked the level of the sea dragon clone. The sea dragon clone was now a level 7 mutated beast. And Mo's virus clones could only catch a large number of level 7 mutated beasts to feed it. It would probably become a level 8 mutated beast by tomorrow morning. And Mo was ready. When it became a level 8 mutated beast, he would control it to explore the sea and search for treasures. Especially the dragon ruins at the bottom of the sea. Mo couldn't forget about it. At the same time, near the Chile base, A woman with an enchanting figure, a delicate face, and blonde hair and red eyes appeared with a boy about 10 years old. The boy's eyes were dull and didn't seem to be intelligent. The woman had a pair of wings on her back and fair skin. Her eyes were as red as blood. She was obviously a vampire. This was Emma and her son. Chapter 196. Chili Base, by the shore. The long-haired young man and the bald middle-aged man were resting on a rock. The long-haired young man's long hair danced in the sea breeze. He picked up the pebbles beside his feet and tossed them into the sea. He said, "This first hunting ground is so boring. The creatures here are too weak. There's no challenge at all. If this goes on, when will I be able to break through?" The bald middle-aged man smiled and said, "Young master, we have set up a restriction on the first hunting ground. Only the top creatures here can reach level 10 super mutated. There are very few that can cause you trouble. This is also the reason why Madam arranged for you to come to the first hunting ground. After all, this place is much safer than the other hunting grounds." The long-haired young man pouted. "Don't mention my mother. She's the one controlling me at home. Now that I'm here, why do you keep mentioning her in front of me? Isn't it annoying?" The bald man quickly lowered his head. "Yes, I promise I won't mention her again." Just as the two of them were talking, two figures flew over quickly from the mountain peak in the distance. Their speed was almost 500 meters per second. Seeing this, the bald man was overjoyed. "Young master, the challenge is here." The long-haired young man was instantly energized. He jumped up and turned to look at the figures in the sky. Blonde hair, crimson eyes, a beautiful face, and an enchanting figure. Her left hand was hugging a 10-year-old child. Seeing this, the young man's eyes lit up. "I didn't expect there to be such a beautiful woman in the first hunting ground." The bald man quickly reminded him. "Young master, the humans in the hunting ground are all inferior humans. They are primitive humans. You must not have any thoughts about them." The young man waved his hand impatiently. I know. The humans in the hunting ground are all prey. I'm just taking a look. I don't really want to do anything." Emma landed on the ground and carefully placed her son beside her. She then looked at the two of them and said coldly, "Did you guys kill the people in the base?" The long-haired young man smiled mockingly and said in English, "Who are you? Prey. We are hunters. Isn't it natural for us to hunt prey?" Emma said coldly, "A life for a life. Then die." As she spoke, her level 10 psychokinesis instantly attacked the long-haired young man. At the same time, she arrived beside the young man in just a second. Although the young man was not injured by the level 10 telekinesis attack, his speed was affected to a certain extent. It was during this time that Emma arrived in front of him. The claw hook on its right wing was aimed directly at the young man's chest. The young man didn't have time to dodge and could only raise his right arm to block. Crack! Sparks flew as Emma's right claw tore off the long-haired young man's sleeve. Emma frowned. That was because the young man's right arm was actually a black metal mechanical arm. The entire metal mechanical arm was connected to the young man's shoulder seamlessly. Attaching a mechanical arm to a human body was clearly not a technology that should exist on Earth. When the young man saw that his sleeve was torn, he chuckled. "Are all inferior humans so impatient? We've only met for a short while and you're already taking off your clothes?" The bald middle-aged man next to him reminded him. "Young master, be careful. She is a level 10 super mutant bloodbreed and also a level 10 psychokinesis." The young man was slightly surprised. But then, his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. "This will be a challenge." As he spoke, the flesh on his right shoulder quickly wriggled and soon covered the entire mechanical arm. Then, a 5-meter-long saber formed on the mechanical arm. The back of the saber was in the shape of a sawtooth. He waved the saber and slashed at Emma. Emma used her advantage in speed to dodge the saber and then continued to attack the long-haired young man. Soon, Emma gained the upper hand with the advantage of her level 10 psychokinesis. Seeing this, the young man grinned and said, "I couldn't tell that this coquettish girl has some skills. Since that's the case, I'll use all my strength to fight you." As he spoke, the saber on his right arm started to glow with a fiery red light. After a while, The 5-meter-long saber looked like a saber that had just been taken out of a fire. It was fiery red all over. The air around the saber was slightly distorted. It was obvious that the temperature of the saber was extremely high. The next moment, he swung his right arm. The saber instantly left his body and flew forward. At the end of the saber, there was a fiery red chain connected to it. The saber came so fast that even Emma couldn't dodge it. Her right arm turned into a hard-horned claw and instinctively wanted to block it. Chi, with a soft sound, her entire right arm was easily chopped off by the saber. Blood immediately spurted out. One must know that the claw that Emma's right arm turned into could easily split open metal and stone. Not only was it sharp, but it was also extremely hard. But now, it was easily chopped off by the opponent's chain saber. How could Emma not be horrified? The young man retracted the fiery red chain saber and said proudly, "Hee, a low-level creature will always be a low-level creature. Don't blame this young master for being ruthless." Dang. As he spoke, he waved the chain saber and attacked Emma again. But at this moment, Emma's body kept emitting cracking sounds. Accompanied by these sounds, her body quickly became bigger. Her eyes were so red that they could drip blood. On the right arm that was originally chopped off, the bones quickly grew out. Around the bones, blood vessels, muscle tissue, and finally, skin began to grow. Very quickly, Emma's body reached a height of 100 meters. Her wingspan reached a width of more than 500 meters. Although it didn't reach the extent of covering the sky, it was still very imposing. The young man was stunned at first, but the next moment, he laughed. "Taking off your clothes when you can't win, isn't that a disgrace to the refined?" The current Emma was 100 meters tall, and her previous clothes were already torn apart. But she didn't care about that. Her right hand turned into a claw and grabbed at the young man. The young man's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. The fiery red chain saber on his right arm danced and attacked the huge Emma. His fiery red high-temperature chainsword could easily split open Emma's body. But such a small injury was not worth mentioning compared to Emma's 100-meter-tall body. After fighting for more than 20 rounds, the young man's stamina seemed to be running out. The chain saber retracted back into his body. The horned layer that wrapped around his right arm quickly receded. His right arm returned to the mechanical arm from before. Seeing this, the long-haired young man cursed, F***CK. Then, he turned around and fled. But his speed was still too slow for the current Emma. Emma was about to catch up to him. He could only snap his fingers. The shoes on his feet quickly pieced together into a flying skateboard. He quickly fled at a speed of 1,000 meters per second. Seeing that the long-haired young man had fled, Emma flapped her wings and pounced at the bald middle-aged man. The bald middle-aged man snorted coldly. "You don't know what's good for you." The next moment, a huge amount of telekinesis directly pressed down on Emma. Boom! Emma was pressed to the ground by the huge telekinesis. The earth trembled, and the trees next to her kept shaking. Several rocks on the coast also fell into the sea with a plop. Looking down from the sky, it was like a huge bat had fallen to the ground. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.